What up, y'all? In this episode, we had Ben Fetter. He's a buddy from Jiu-Jitsu. That's where we met. He was just a few months away from 6 months paternity leave. Had a great job, great income, and he decided to leave and start his own company. He saw a hole in the market, and he believes he can fill it. So he runs a company called Thesis, where him and his team of engineers, they essentially use AI and machine learning models in order to better predict the market, to essentially give a better return on investment for investors. Product is largely for like a financial advisor. They would use that and then give that advice out to their clients. It was a super insightful conversation. Learned a lot of things. It was something that I was not as familiar with, so had a ton of fun, and I hope y'all enjoy that conversation. As always, we have shirts. Shirts are for sale. If you want one, you can hit me up. They're $25. We can ship them to you, as well as you can always stop by and grab it, or I can bring it to you as well. And don't forget, code Brodey for Redmond's salt, Redmond's Relight, Redmond's toothpaste, all fantastic stuff. Nonetheless, though, enjoy the episode.
Okay.
We have some fun?
Sounds good.
Fuck yeah. Let's do it. All right. Woo! 3, 2, 1. Woo! Ben, the fuck is up, dude?
Not much. Just grinding away. How are you?
Oh,
thanks for having me.
Trying to do the same. I guess doing the same. Dude, coffee's delicious.
Thank you. 309 coffee.
Shout out 309. It was delicious. The lady liked her chai as well. She's a big chai fan. That was cute of you to remember.
Yeah, well, we've had our little coffee dates, and I was like, you know what, I should, really get him something to be thankful for.
You don't have to do all that, bro. I'm grateful for you.
Oh, well, thank you. That makes somebody at least. It was a little selfish of me because I was like, I think one of the things we were talking about is my horrible coffee addiction. I was like, you know what, I should go get a coffee before I head over to Jordan's house. And if I'm going to do that, I can't just show up with one coffee. Like, what kind of monster people are probably going to, maybe think I'm a monster anyway. But, no, I'm not the kind of person that would show up without bringing a coffee.
Just one coffee.
Just one coffee. Like, hey, you guys, you want to sip while you're here?
Yeah. But isn't that all good deeds, though? Matthew McConaughey talks about this, and it's something that I think about a lot. And I know I'm going to butcher this, but essentially he was saying, in a way, that all good deeds are selfish, and we should be more selfish in that sense, because it does feel good to do something good for others. And it is inherently a selfish act. Even though technically you're being selfless, it is selfish because you do feel good.
I think that's a fair assessment. Like, there's always something, like, even if it's just giving to charity, but you don't get anything out of it. In Judaism, the most charitable thing you can do is give somebody money without you knowing who it's going to and without them knowing who it is. And then, of course, there's the opposite side of the spectrum where people make ththese very large donations because they can get their name on a building. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that is still charity. But, there are things that are meaningful to me that I really appreciate and that has been a lot to me. And I want to support them because it means a lot to me. There's when I was in 2020, before COVID, I got stuck in Hawaii, which is not the worst place to be. I was supposed to go to Japan and Australia to go see this band, The National. And
dude, I saw them in Ireland.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
that's too funny.
Limerick.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that changed your life somewhat positively.
They're fucking phenomenal.
They are phenomenal.
Yeah.
But this really changed my life for dramatics. So I was studying for the CFA exams before I left, and I had just missed multiple concerts of them. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to Japan. I'm going to go to Australia. I'm going to see them. There's nothing that's going to stop me. And then this little lab in Wuhan decided to have a little bit of a leak,
accidentally,
that crippled the United States economy in the most perfect way. We'll get into that. But one thing it personally did for me is, despite all my efforts, canceled my trip to Japan and Australia. So I just I decided instead of Japan, I'm going to go to Hawaii, and then I'll go to Australia from there. Hawaii, Australia shuts down. And my choices were either go back to New York, which was always a cesspool, but you can imagine living in an apartment I lived in a little townhome kind of thing, and it was a brick building, and 4 apartments, whatever, right? So I wasn't surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of people, but it was a small little city and lots of compact people, and I didn't want to do that during the middle of a pandemic. So I was like, I might as well stay in Hawaii. And, I started out with like $500 a month for like a 2-bed, 2-bath facing the water, and stayed there for about a month. And then that's when I met my wife, and stayed there for 4 months, which is, I tell people that in terms of this big life-changing decision, staying in Hawaii was probably one of the only smart decisions I ever made. And obviously, now I have a kid, another one on the way, which is fantastic.
Was she coincidentally in Hawaii, or does she live there?
She was living there for about 5 years.
Okay.
She was an unbelievable photographer. Maybe I am not the best judgment of art or anything like that, but to me, it's she's absolutely beautiful and super talented. And she's living for 5 years, and then stayed there for 4 months with her. Hung out there every day, and then it's like, all right, well, my landlord wanted to increase my rent from $1,200 to $6,000 because the tourists started coming in.
Hold on, bro. Hold on. $1,200 to $6,000?
Yeah. So, obviously laws of supply and demand, yada, yada. And nobody was there. I was there before they had a 2-week quarantine. So nobody's going to go to Hawaii, rent a place, or stay at a hotel for 2 weeks and pay exorbitant prices. Yeah. But then they started opening things up. Actually, before we go into that, she and I managed to travel to several islands for like a few $100, like for flights and hotels, nothing. It was unbelievable, and nobody was there. But when people started coming in, she was like, "Oh, we're going to start charging $6,000 if you want to stay." I was like, "Yeah, this, between working East Coast time and all of that, it just seemed like time to go." And in terms of moving here, things were open. It's a different time, obviously. I had some friends here, but the dumbest reason I give people is just it was between Hawaii and New Jersey, Texas, and I was like, all right, well, that makes
perfectly in the middle.
Yeah, the dumbest reason to move somewhere, but I moved here in August 2020, and first time I landed, it was like 130 degrees or something like that. It was just, I'm not quite used to the heat.
Quite exaggerant. I don't think it gets that high here.
Yeah,
it's not Vegas.
Jewish people like to complain, especially about weather, which we do not control.
Are you sure?
But, yeah. Well, I remember I was listening to your podcast with Wale. And you were talking about the rain seating.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought we had a monopoly on this. I'm just kidding.
We're the cloud seeding company. Apparently, I was wrong. Apparently, it was it was like 100+ miles away from the actual area. I looked it up afterwards. I looked it up while I was re-listening to it because I was curious. I was like, every time I say something outlandish, I'm like, let's double check. And apparently, it was a couple counties away, but it's still a fucking weird coincidence.
And that broader topic of admitting when you're wrong, I probably not one to give advice, but when you're wrong about something, it's usually better just to correct it. However, I will say that most times it's just if you're arguing with a friend or your wife or somebody, it's like, just dig in irrationally. You never surrender. It's like that line in The Wire. Have you seen The Wire?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Great fucking show.
Yeah, I forget. I'm blanking on the name of the character. Something along the lines of, if we find that lie, we fight on that lie, or something like that. I can't remember exactly. You can look up the quote. But the point, it was about the Iraq War, which not condoning, of course, we shouldn't have got in there. But, if it's a lie, we fight on that lie. And just dig in. Like you're already on that path. Now, of course, this is much less gravity than a war we should never enter.
Starting a 20-year war.
20-year war.
Cost trillions of dollars. Yeah.
Charles.
Some Charles, thank you.
That is right.
I've been rewatching.
On that lie, but we got fight.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. I had started rewatching it.
Incredible show.
But I already watched season 2 and 1 and 2. My wife gave up on it, so now I'm just watching season 3 casually when I can't watch Lost because my daughter is watching some Disney princess movie, so I can't watch Lost because I've never seen it.
That's wild to me.
Yeah, I know. Like I'm like so far behind the times on some
I never
TV
finished it. I never finished it. I watched like the first 2 seasons.
I don't think anybody finished it. It's 6 seasons and there are like 25 episodes each versus, and we could talk about relative new TV where it's like 6 episodes. It's like, congratulations.
Speaking of which, have you seen His and Hers?
No,
Netflix?
that is with
John Brenthal and Tessa Thompson?
No, I haven't seen it.
Bro.
It's good.
Bruh. Must watch TV. It is fucking good. It is really good.
It's only
6 episodes and not hour long, like 35, 40 minutes. Bang, 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 bang.
So here's my issue.
Tell me.
Why is it? I'm about to. I think that shows that are under 10 episodes, while I'm impressed, I'm effectively watching a longer movie. And the movies are fantastic, but and I just watched One Battle After Another, and that was pretty good. But when I'm watching like 6 episodes of a show like Chernobyl, and people put that
fucking good though.
It's a great 6 episodes, but then people give it all this credit and like, oh, this is the greatest show of all time. It's like, you wrote 6 episodes. Like there's no arc. There's no, you can't really get into the characters. Even, Band of Brothers, you can have these different perspectives. And in terms of miniseries, I would say if you include True Detective season 1, Band of Brothers, I'd put that well ahead of Chernobyl. But it's 6 episodes. And then you get all the credit in the world for it. And then that same director, and then, of course, he's well accomplished. Who might talk shit about a guy who's done what he's done? And before that,
what else has he done? I don't know. I don't even know who the director is.
Before that show, and you can quote me the exact movies, and I believe he did like a superhero gag kind of like,
she'll find it.
Yeah.
What character am I looking up again?
The director of Chernobyl.
Director.
Yeah. And he did like a couple of like silly comedy movies, and then he wrote Chernobyl, which again is a great piece of art, absolute cinema as whatever is.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. Who is the?
No, it's not him.
Who is the director?
Maybe look up Chernobyl. Let's see here. It's not John Roddick. Maybe he's the director, the producer. He also did The Last of Us.
He did all 5 episodes.
The Last of Us producer, I think is probably the name I'm looking for.
That's what he says. It says he's
a director for that. It's not the person I was.
Well.
But
whoever took it over now is I can't fucking stand.
The Last of Us. Yeah. So
such a
Craig Mazin. Yeah.
Creator of Chernobyl.
Yes, creator of Chernobyl. Thank you. So before that, he was superhero movie. Mythic Quest.
He was on Dune Part 2 though.
That was after. That was after Chernobyl. That's probably so. He's get some credit there, but he wasn't on the original Hangover. He was just on the
2 and 3.
2 and 3, which 2 is essentially a carbon copying. But
the official. That's the Watchmen podcast.
Yeah.
So okay. So he really didn't do too much before that.
No, but then he gets credit for The Last of Us, and I don't play video games anymore because I'm running my deep learning models on my gaming GPU 24/7, which is a real sad state of affairs for me as a adult who's like a 33 now. Like 5 years ago, I got the best GPU on the market, and now it's like you don't even have capacity on your GPU to play video games anymore.
I feel
at
that.
a time. But anyway, so it's like this guy wrote 6 episodes or something. He gets all the credit in the world for that, but then he gets The Last of Us, which is probably my favorite video game. I think it's a beautiful game. I think the second game was actually quite well done. I think it was bold, but I tried to watch the second season.
It was ass.
It was
terrible.
I could not get through it.
No, we stopped what? Fucking episode 4?
No, we finished it.
Oh, did we? Reluctantly. We finished it reluctantly.
I'm willing to tune in to the next season because, God, my brain's escaping.
Following Abby.
It's following Abby, and that actress's name is.
Oh God.
I'm sorry.
No,
She's a very talented actress. She's in Justified and a few other shows.
Yeah, Justified's a good one.
Very good show. My father and I.
Kind of underrated. A lot of people
Very
don't talk
underrated.
about that. Timothy Oliphant.
Deaver.
Or Oliphant?
Timothy Oliphant. Yeah,
Oliphant, right? That motherfucker can act.
he is.
Good.
Low
key guy.
I think I've seen some of his other things that are, to me, they're fine.
Yeah.
But you put him and Clint Eastwood and see these guys in a cowboy hat. It's just like, it's, what's the term? S tier is what the kids are calling it. Like, it's just like, there's nothing better than Timothy Oliphant in a cowboy hat.
Yeah. It's just like John Brenthal in certain things.
Yeah.
Jason Statham. I'm going to go watch that. What is it? What's the new one coming out? Same exact movie over and over again. Same exact character. But I'm still going to go watch it.
I haven't seen some of his other films.
Viva la Madness.
What is it?
Viva la Madness. Or Shelter.
Shelter. There it is.
There was this one movie, I think it's called The Bank Job, where it's still a bank robbery, but there was a lot of depth in terms of the plot and like why they were doing this.
With Jason Statham?
Yeah, and he was excellent in it. And,
he's a dad. Did they kill his kid?
I don't recall the exact
Like the plot twist is like he watches somebody he knows get killed, and then he joins like the task force.
No,
I know.
Movie.
Is it?
It's the one that he basically there's they get pictures of the princess in England with compromising photos, and it's been a while since the movie. But point being is he's
pull up his IMDb. What I was going to say on this before she's looking that up is it okay? So I hear what you're saying about the 6 episodes in the limited series, but then here, hold on. I'm thinking of Wrath of Man is the one I'm thinking of. Which one are you talking about?
The bank something. I think it's The Bank Job. He's also in Snatch, and apparently he's good in that kind of role. But
I mean, he plays the same character.
Yeah, The Bank Job, which I don't know how popular that movie was, but it was good.
I've never seen that one.
I think he's a good actor. I
think he's good at what he does.
Yeah, like Timothy Oliphant. I don't know. He just can really steal the stage, and I think Justified is, as you said, like one of the.
It's good.
I think it's a great shot. Like I think the ending is it's hard to stick a landing as great as The Wire is. I don't think it did that. I think the ending of Justified is one of those perfect endings. So I don't know why they brought it back.
That takes me to my point. Like, okay, so sure, I see what you're saying with like the 6-episode limited series. Like you're watching like a slightly longer movie. It maybe doesn't take as much skill. I would argue that it still does. But is it worse than these fucking shows that just go on way too long? Like, there's just some shows you watch and you're like, this is a 1-season show. I don't need another season. This was great. Leave it at this. And that's why I guess I do enjoy these 6 episodes or these 10-episode shows. Like American Primeval. Fucking fantastic. Peter Berg. 6 episodes long with Taylor Kish is the main character. I mean, just fucking incredible.
I think if you accomplish something of that level, you deserve all the credit in the world. To pivot to finance a little bit, not really pivot, but as a side, I think there's a lot of one-hit wonders in the world, and they tend to make a lot of noise and get a lot of credit, and that's fine. Like you did something that is in many ways unmatched, like Chernobyl. I think you can't take away how excellent of a show that is. It's just in finance, for example, we watch The Big Short or Margin Call, especially The Big Short. A lot of those guys, they have this roadmap of success, and it wasn't luck. It was absolutely skill. They deserve all the credit in the world. But when you get super famous off of becoming the, one of those guys in that movie, you get, Michael Burry, again, legendary investor for what he did. And you get Christian Bale playing you in a movie. Like, what you did back then set you up for success for your entire career. There's always going to be people investing in his fund or today subscribing to a Substack. But since then, he has not really been at the top of the investment chart. So usually underperforming the S&P 500, as have a lot of active managers, which we can get into. But they get credit for what they did. They did excellent. They were, they did something extraordinary. But I mean, how much credit can we give somebody that does that once and then carries that on?
You want consistency.
You
want to see them repeat it. I think Peter Berg is definitely the perfect example of that. That's a man who just keeps knocking it out of the park.
Sure.
Show after show after show. But I get what you're saying. You're doing like a one-off 6-episode series. You get really famous for it. Maybe you get the next job because of it. And then it's very average, right? You nailed it. Maybe just all the stars aligned for that one project. You had the right crew. You had the right producer. You had the right director. You had the right actors. Because that's something that... I think Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, when they were on Joe Rogan, as well as Ethan Hawke, kind of talked about that. They were like, there's this magic when everybody on the crew is just locked in, ready to make a good movie. One of the things that they talked about when they made The Rip, which was really a good movie. There was lots of misdirection, really good writing, very phenomenal acting. And Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, they produced it. It was their company that paid for it. And one of the things that they were saying is that, they understand it takes that magic. Like, it takes everybody all the way down to the janitor, all the way to the cameraman, everybody needs to be in sync. And one of the things that they did was they made sure that they wrote it into the contract that if the movie does successful, the entire crew gets a bonus. Everybody all the way down to the very smallest of the people on set. Everybody gets a bonus, and you can kind of tell in the movie, fucking everyone does really well. Everybody in there is putting on a good show.
I mean, incentive alignment, obviously that's super important, but I guess it's what's the term? It's harder to get out of bed when you're sleeping in satin sheets.
Silk sheets, yeah.
It's you did this process, and now what are you going to do? There's that boxer who beat Anthony Joshua a few years ago, and people can't remember his name, like myself.
You want to see them repeat it.
Yeah.
I get it. You're looking for consistency. One-offs are cool. You get credit for that, but you want to see them duplicate it. You want to see them do it again. I would agree with that.
Especially, I think I just come from more of a finance background, and maybe that just leaked into my perspective on life. You outperform for X amount of time, okay, but are you consistently generating an extra 400, 500 basis points per year for your clients? Or I think what we're going to see a lot of is there's going to be a lot of these hedge fund managers that bought gold, and maybe a year before that bought Bitcoin, and really bought very heavily into things that I'm not saying they have no value, but in terms of establishing intrinsic value, there's no justification from a fundamental perspective, why Bitcoin or gold have any value. It's just you and I agree that there is this price that I'm willing to sell it to you and the price that you're willing to buy it from me. Versus with a company, it's like, okay, well, this has $10 of cash flows and I want to sell it for 100. That's 10 times cash flows. That's the norm for the industry at this point. That's a fair deal. Or maybe you say, I want this much more or whatever. But we have to agree on that, right? But point being is that a lot of these guys, they make one really great investment, and maybe it was just the right timing, and it was a bold choice to be a differentiated opinion, but that's not sustainable. Gold's not gonna. It might, but it's banking on 200% return in 2 years or whatever it is,
like a GameStop.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen again, right? It could, right? Yeah. But it's not very likely. It took a lot. It took a lot to get that, right? So let's jump into it. First, I guess tell people kind of what your background is and kind of like what it is that you like specialize in when it comes to financing.
Sure. So I am a CFA charter holder and an accountant by trade. The last 4 years, I've been working on thematic indices using natural language processing.
And what is that?
And just to back up even further, like what is an index? An index, you are probably invested in an index fund. What the index does is basically publishes a list of stocks that the index fund will match. So the fund itself, all of the people are doing there is managing the stocks and the holdings or the fixed income, whatever it is, in the ETF by whatever the publisher is telling it. And that rule set obviously is quite large, but the whole idea is to have a passive strategy, something that is low cost, systematic, and repeatable. Those are the three kind of tenets in my opinion. So the S&P 500, it is made up of the 500 largest U.S. stocks with some rule sets, certain amount of profitability over a certain amount of years, other factors that go into it as well. It'll be the 500 largest U.S. stocks generally. And the index fund will buy those 500, hold it for the quarter until it gets rebalanced or reconstitution. And of course, there's a billion different ways you could do that. You could do market cap weighted. NVIDIA Mag 7 stocks are going to have a larger percentage than smaller, the number 499 and 500 stock. Other ones are equal weight. Where I came in the last few years in the thematic indices is these are very heavily retail products. And the idea here is instead of investing in more factors or just pure sectors based off of criteria that places that stock into that sector, right? Like if I'm Apple, I just get thrown into the software or maybe a hardware global industry classification system. And that was the traditional way of doing it. So what I was doing for the last 4 years was building a software system that through natural language processing could identify, instead of control Fing through thousands and thousands of filings for a certain search term and then having to read that search term that's in the right context that stock is engaged in that industry. The software was able to use the natural language processing where it would take the search term, go through thousands of filings for me, look for the search term in the right context, and see if it qualified for that sector. And at the end of the day, we'd be able to produce sectors like artificial intelligence, distributed ledger, nuclear, and these are very differentiated products from, but those three would be, AI would probably be under software, distributed ledger, probably software as well, and then nuclear would just fall into energy. So you have these differentiated products that retail, if you wanted to invest in AI, you want to focus in quantum computing, you're able to invest in those specific sectors that follow that theme. And really enjoyed that job. And what it really taught me was the power of systematic investing from the perspective of a lot of the thematic fund managers. They were what we would call active management. And there's a few different blends of it, but the service that most people are probably familiar with are hedge funds and mutual funds, and now more recently, actively managed ETFs. And the difficulty of those, depending on how they do it, is you are relying on the knowledge, and not just the knowledge, but being able to put that knowledge to use in a consistent manner for selection of stocks and equities and whatever they're investing in. And the problem with that is, one, especially on the hedge fund side, it can be extraordinarily expensive. There's the term 2 and 20 is something that probably a lot of people have heard, where a hedge fund will charge 2% of the fees of the total assets every year, and then they'll take 20% of the gains above a hurdle rate. So if it's 10% gains and the hurdle rate's 5%, that other 5% gets split, 80-20 for the investor. But the issue, if you can pull up SPIVA, SPIVA, just pick up like SPIVA survey or something of that sort, is compared to passive management, most of these, I can go there. After you account for fees, these funds tend to, you see here, percentage of all cap funds, over 15 years, the percentage of all large cap funds compared to the S&P 500 underperformed. So being able to have a system in place that outperforms a passive index is extremely difficult because you're charging 2 and 20. And not to say there's no use for hedge funds. There's certainly less volatility in a lot of ways, depending on what they do. So instead of having annualized 15% a year, you might get annualized 13%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but over 72 years, you're not going to double another 2 times. But the way that investing has traditionally been, I think before 2008 especially, is why would you just try and match the benchmark? You need to have these hedge fund guys, these mutual fund guys, because they're the smartest and they're the best in the world. And I'm not saying that they're not, but depending on the kind of fund structure they run, it's either very expensive or you're relying on their knowledge to be able to be actionable in a consistent and systematic way, which is often not. They'll make decisions that, maybe it is a better decision at the end of the day, but it's not a better process. It's like in jiu-jitsu, to relate it back to that a little bit. I might be able to sub somebody once in a while because I got lucky, but like the system that you're building is far more important. Can I systematically dominate my opponent or be like me and just jump on, some white belt's legs? But the trend over the last decade has been moving from, these mutual funds and hedge funds into more passive management, where you get a rule set that is systematic. You don't need to have expertise, running the portfolio just to follow a index. And that over time, as that chart showed, tends to outperform these, paying these experts 2 and 20. And that's really where I found a lot of interest from, understanding the systematic investing side, where it's not just cheaper, it's not just more available to clients because you can't just invest in a hedge fund. You need a lot of money. You can invest in an ETF. There's a lot of democratization to access to investing, but it's a better process for decision making. So, I did that for about 4 years. Really enjoyed building that, but I got an itch, and one of the things I was exploring with a buddy of mine was, this is great. Natural language processing falls under AI. Is there a way that we could utilize this, not just for selecting stocks for a theme or, having some differentiated strategy, but like to actually have more effective ways of managing your portfolio? And we started with Bitcoin, which anything I say here is, of course, not financial advice. I had some Bitcoin out of personal interest. It felt like a good part of my portfolio to have a hedge on. I started probably back in 2021, my interest in it. I lost a little bit of money like everybody else and started diving probably a little bit too deep in the weeds in crypto for anybody's liking. But the biggest problem I was trying to solve was, how do I mitigate my risk to the downside? And how do I see when it's a proper opportunity for me to go long again, which, go buying the stock or buying crypto in this case. And when you look at what has traditionally been done for not just Bitcoin, but for markets in general, there's kind of these different aspects to what you can do. You can either have a very fundamental approach, which again, going back to what I said before, you need to be able to translate that knowledge into a decision-making process that is best for your best outcomes. And that's very difficult. And not only is it difficult, you're spending weeks and months doing research on making a decision, and maybe it might just be too late to have that decision. The time may have come, or you bring it to an investment committee and the loudest person in the room, everybody's been in one of these meetings, whether it's an investment committee or another decision, where everybody might agree before the meeting. You need the best thought out process, the best decision-making ability here, and the loudest voice in the room wins. So you get these decisions that are suboptimal because it's not what the person who's got the most experience or can yell the loudest and everybody's afraid of him or her kind of thing. So that's one of the issues with fundamental. And again, that goes back to the active versus passive part. The next one would be more of a quantitative approach. The idea there is, we can take past signals, past data, and build out an algorithm based on that past data that will enable us to make decisions. And that definitely works to some degree. The issue with that approach is, again, you still have to spend a lot of time in research, and there's difficulty scaling that. But either you are building a system where you, as the analyst, need to input. You have to know what to look for in the first place. I'll use price to earnings as an example. Price to earnings is a ratio of the price of the stock versus the earnings per share. And historically, for example, the S&P 500, 15 has been a pretty average level. And these quantitative models this is a very simple example. Of course, it can be very complex and very useful. Will analyze the relationship of the price to earnings to the return in the stock market. And one might say that at 15, it's average on a quantitative, y equals mx plus b, simple example. Once we start to get to 30 PE, price to earnings, the stock market is likely overvalued. And we're relying on the analysts to identify that relationship, claim that it's useful, and put into the algorithm and keep it set. The issue that I found, this applies for Bitcoin. There's certain ratios like market value to realized value, like what's the current value versus when do people buy it. Mm-hmm. And these ratios adapt over time. So if I was in a coma in 2015, and I woke up today and I saw the price to earnings ratios, I'd probably be screaming from the rooftop, get me out of the market. Or let's go back a year from now even, was looking at 30, 35 PE levels, which means that compared to 15, we're obviously dramatically overvalued. And from a quantitative perspective, that relationship would show that it's overvalued, but it doesn't grow over time. It doesn't adapt to the changing market regimes because I've set a formula in place that I thought was important. I ignored the ones I didn't think were important or I couldn't tell were important. And I said, this is the relationship. And when it hits this number, maybe there's some different features and aspects to that, different variables that I've input. This is looking to me like it's overvalued or devalued depending on perspective. So I didn't think either of those really worked with Bitcoin. Again, I think looking at MVRV ratio, market value to realized value, is a very common point that people use. They'll say, I want to buy at this level and I want to sell at this level. Well, again, different market regimes change over time. What was overvalued 10 years ago is not necessarily an unreasonable number today. So that led us to start looking into this machine learning algorithm that we ended up building. And effectively
What up, y'all? I know, interrupting the conversation again. I apologize. Not really, though, because I want to talk to you about a great product, Redmond's toothpaste. I know this is kind of silly, recommending a toothpaste, but dude, it has completely changed the way my mouth feels. It is a fantastic toothpaste. It's way better than any other toothpaste I've used, and that's just the truth. So you can get yours now as a What's Up Brodey listener. You can get 15% off with code Brodey, or you can follow my bio in my Instagram to check out, and that'll also get you 15% off. Now back to the conversation.
Did with that is instead of, well, machine learning in general, for our use case, is instead of telling and spending all this time building algorithms, let's focus on building a scalable architecture that we could input the data and let the machine figure out what's important, what's not important, and what is important and not important over time. So again, going back to the price to earnings ratio, it's still important, right? But there are other features that I may have thought were not important, or may have thought were important, and I can see now in this current regime which ones do not have a relationship or a strong relationship to the price of the underlying asset. So again, looking at price to earnings, okay, that feature matters, and it's always mattered, but I don't force this algorithm to make a decision for me. The machine learning algorithm can figure out, okay, well, yeah, price to earnings is higher, but we're also dealing with, in this setting, that this is a relatively acceptable ratio, that people are willing to pay this premium. And there's other aspects that I thought, you might think are important. Just using crypto, again, using Bitcoin as an example, a lot of people point to Coinbase app rankings. And if it's the most downloaded app, it usually means that retail is all into crypto and they want to buy. And that worked quite well, actually, back in from like 2020, 2022, all that. And that was a very powerful signal. Today, not so much. It's one of those signals that in finance, there's a if we have if everybody has the knowledge of this, it's no longer usable. It's the efficient market hypothesis, where if the market is perfectly efficient because everybody has the same amount of knowledge, there's no price discovery. So in that aspect, some of these signals that, again, they were very important from a quantitative perspective, or they might have been, part of an analyst's decision-making in a committee, they may not be important anymore because that signal has been overflown. So what our machine learning algorithm is able to pick up on, and what does matter that we may not have thought mattered, or may think matter, oppositely, doesn't matter, we thought mattered, and then adapt to different market regimes. I've just went on a little bit of a spiel there, so I think it's a little bit easier to explain this on using an analogy. And I'll bring this back to Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm going to bring it back to another sport, if that's okay. So if you're at a tournament, and I know nothing about you, and I know nothing about your opponent, and in the same weight class, and you're both blue belts, purple belts, the expectation would be that it's a 50-50 match. But what if we could place you both into a setting, and we can determine if it's really 50-50 based on the features that are undergoing in that setting. The simplest example would be, did one of you guys just have a match before? Maybe somebody got a bye, that person's rested. One person went to battle for the first round, and it's just the luck of the draw, of course. So, okay, that person's tired, and now that's one feature. Maybe one person had a bad weight cut. Maybe one person peaked right at the tournament. You're going in with an injury. You got into a fight with your wife the night before and you couldn't sleep because you were on the couch. because she didn't want you to sign up for the tournament and waste the whole day. That definitely affected me. But if we could place you as the jiu-jitsu athlete into this setting with these features and analyze it, the true odds are not going to be 50-50. We can start to analyze where you are in that setting and if it's you're more or less likely to win that match. Now, in another sport analogy I'll give is, we got the Olympics coming up.
Started yesterday.
I was really impressed with the opening ceremony. I was watching with the Nyla. I was watching this figure skate. And I was like, "What the heck? How do you do that?" This is why I work in finance. I'm not a professional athlete because I can't even fathom doing some of the things they do. But I'm a big hockey guy. 1980 Olympics. United States are facing the Red Army hockey team. They've won 3 Olympic gold medals in a row. They had just beaten the United States 9-0. And the United States were a bunch of college kids, and the Russians were, these veterans who literally,
juiced up
like
men.
Yeah, like national pride is on the line for everybody, but a little bit more when you're part of the Army and your expectations to win gold medals. So if you look online, you can find the stats, like the odds are. Some quotes are 10-1. I've seen higher in the odds lines. And the United States was given no chance. Okay. But there's a lot of different aspects that we have to understand with that feature, what the setting that the United States was in. They were playing at home in New York. They didn't, of course, they had to travel there, but they had the crowd on their side. The Russians, as a veteran team, they had experienced win after win. They're going in there expecting to win. They're not going to, there's not this, have you ever seen the movie Miracle? Mm-hmm. There's no Herb Brooks speech coming before the game. This is your time. Go out there and take it. There's nothing like that. This is the moment of their lifetimes for these college kids versus the Russians, just, it's part of the job. And then after the first period, as we talk about different market regimes, the game's 2-2. So things have shifted, of course, back in the United States' favor in a lot of ways. Okay, so look at price to earnings again. It's starting to shift towards a higher level, but then they cut interest rates. So that changes the math on what's an acceptable price to earnings. Similarly to the Miracle on Ice, Vladislav Tretiak, who greatest goaltender in the world, he's probably the greatest goaltender to never play the NHL. They pull him. This guy's unbeatable, except for that first period, of course, he gives up 2 goals. And the odds shift dramatically because not only did the United States not have to face the best goaltender in the world, they now had the confidence, we can do this. We just chase the guy that everybody else feared. And again, this is a little bit dramatic, so I might point with my analogy, but that team wasn't truly the 10 or 100 or whatever one underdogs. In that setting, in that moment, it was their time. It was their time to win. And it was, I'm not going to claim there was a guarantee. It was inevitable, of course, but in that setting with those features and the way it was, the United States had a much better chance of winning than where they were. And that's effectively what, going back to what we do, that's what we try to do with assets, is we place an asset into a setting and we give it certain feature sets, such as stock index levels, stock index ETF levels, commodity ETF levels, interest rates, some fundamental and quantitative approaches that we can add into this feature set. And rather than us telling the machine what to look for, we let the machine decide what is not important and how is these things that do or do not matter adapt over time. And the way we designed this, again, going back to the idea of the Bitcoin model, was how do I not lose my back? So we wanted to design this in a way that was very sophisticated in its analysis, but was very easy to use. It's a very simple range. -1 means most likely undervalued. 1 means most likely overvalued. 0 is most likely fairly valued. And, there's a spectrum between -1 and 1. And what we did with a Bitcoin model and what we can do for each asset is we place the asset into a setting and we can determine what is the probability that this asset is carrying more upside or downside risk. And we can determine on whether or not it's a time to be long or a time to maybe get out of the market. And we were using that for a time, just personal money, seeing where it goes. And it went quite well for the first year and a half now. Just again, personal money, seeing where this goes. And we greatly outperformed, but one of the things we were thinking could we go start a fund? And that just didn't really make too much sense, I think. So what we decided, especially because of the knowledge I picked up on active versus passive, I don't think anybody in finance starts the career and saying, I want to be an ETF manager. I mean, maybe now, but you watch Michael Burry and these other guys, Steve Eisman, The Big Short, and all that, Ray Dalio, and you want to be a hedge fund manager. You want to make the big bucks. You want to make these big, bold decisions. And again, there was definitely a time for that where that was maybe more useful. But we wanted to produce something that would be low cost, very easy to use for advisors and managers, and would add to the efficiency of decision making. So maybe not always the best decisions, but more consistent decision making for our clients. The things that we can do with this model, besides for the risk off, which I find really interesting, is the idea of asset rotation or sector factor rotation, things like that. And it's very simple with our outputs. If somebody says -0.25 versus -0.2, -0.25 just means it's more likely to be undervalued than the other one. So maybe you want to rotate into that. And that is a very valuable tool. If you're a financial advisor, just giving the simplest example here, if you're a 60-40 portfolio, which is 60% equity, 40% bonds, I mean, that's been the standard bearer forever. However, that's greatly underperformed over the last 5 years. Now, what if instead we had a very affordable, easy to use tool that said, okay, I don't want to go too far away from the standard 60-40 portfolio, but maybe it's time to take on a little bit more equity risk. How do I do that? What are my choices? And my choices are go spend a ton of time and effort on the fundamental side, doing a lot of research, which works, but it's a lot of time and effort. I could build a quantitative model, which, if you build it right, it could still work, but I still got to go build that individual model for that asset, and that's not great. Or, you could build a systematic process that, I love the cooing, it's fine. Build a systematic process that, okay, this asset, according to, at least, this algorithm says that it looks undervalued and compared to this other one. Maybe instead of the 60-40 portfolio, I may be able to juice the returns without taking on too extra risk by moving to 70-30. And I have again, I'm not claiming it's going to be a better decision, but if you're explaining that to your clients and that you feel that this algorithm works, and it's saying that this stock or factor or whatever it is undervalued, maybe we just pivot a little bit more towards that. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to do that. You're not going to go pay a hedge fund 2 and 20 to do that. To get the kind of technology we have, you can do it at a passive cost. And that's really what we're trying to get to, is getting these tools to advisors and other investors, that it will be a faster, cheaper, and better process in investing. Of course, I hope it's more effective at the end of the day, better returns. So far, our models have shown that. But I'm not going to go as far as claiming for certain if you use our tool, you get better results. But what I will say is you're going to have a better process in mind, and you're going to be able to answer your clients' questions. How are you utilizing the most sophisticated tools? Are you just reading financial reports?
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it's something I think about a lot in the sense, like on a broader sense, where, when you're thinking about those football games, or you're thinking about that matchup where you use the analogy of USA versus Russia, and you're talking about, or, even take it back a step further, on the individual grounds of jiu-jitsu. I think about this a lot because, there's, use my buddy Reggie for an example. Like when we talk football, he's thinking about it from a very logistical standpoint, as if everyone operating on that field is not a human being, almost like as if they're robots in a sense. Not in a negative way, just in the sense of like the way he's thinking this team should win because of these logical reasons, right? And what it sounds like to me, in a way, is that your model is factoring in human nature, in a sense, right? Where like you use the analogy of, did you have to sleep on the couch the night before that tournament? Like, was your stomach upset 10 minutes before? Did you have to take a shit or what? Those are factors, and those are a reason why you might win or lose on that given day. Like where you said, with the USA and the Rush thing, they probably had no business winning that game. They had no business winning that game. But the stars aligned. There were so many different factors in that aren't a typical AI or a typical, maybe even a financial advisor typically isn't looking at, because it's against the rules, quote unquote, right? And I think that's really interesting because. I think that a lot of things are a lot more simple than people think, and like that some things are just a little bit more obvious, right? Like,
I just want to make sure everybody understands we are not so advanced that we can input. Am I going to shit myself for my jiu-jitsu match?
No, I understand, but you're trying to factor in.
Yeah. Jokes aside, it's the problem that, again, go with quantitative or fundamental. It's like you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. And the approach we took is, okay, I am a value investor. Like, I think that price to earnings is super important, and if I looked at it from purely that perspective, again, not financial advice here, but the market looks a little hot, but the things that are obvious, one, they're probably obvious to everybody. So there's signal saturation, going back to the efficient market hypothesis. You're already baked in. Things that, I didn't think were important, my model might be able to pick up and actually, this is becoming a more important feature. I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know for certain, but the price of the financial stock ETF might have not been important to, let's say, Tesla or, a while ago, but maybe it's becoming more important as Tesla maybe loans money directly to their customers. So their Tesla's now becoming, I don't know if they're actually doing this, but Tesla might be becoming a bank in some ways. So they're now related to that financial thing. If I was a quantitative investor or fundamental perspective, I'd only be looking at the things that I knew mattered in the past. So with your football analogy, you've got the 11 guys in the field, and you may have a preconceived notion. They're 11. I'm a Giants fan, which is horrible to do.
So is Reggie. That's funny.
Yeah, it's been tough for us last few years, so I'm a little more hopeful. But if you're, have your best 11 guys on the field versus the Eagles' best 11 guys, you're going to lose because the Eagles are just a better team. But actually, let's go back even further. The Giants played the Patriots in 2007.
Yeah.
The Patriots are the best team of all time that year. But what the Giants had the dominant defensive line and an aggressive blitz package to be able to get to Tom Brady. And they also had a guy nobody ever heard of catch a ball in his head. That's a little bit hard to bake in those kinds of things. But, it's not always, just like you have the best ideas, like the ones that have worked in the past. It's like, okay, like how do I find these things that go against my preconceived notions of working, or give up the things that I relied upon and find what's working best now, and getting the best result that I can. And again, going back, I like to give sports analogies. With jiu-jitsu, it's like the meta of jiu-jitsu. People use that term quite a bit, right? And a few years ago, all the great leg lockers were unstoppable. Like nobody could figure it out. Now it's about, who can control and dominate their opponent. I clearly didn't get that message because, again, I spam leg locks, but a much better, more talented jiu-jitsu player than me will be ahead of that curve. It's like, okay, well, now everybody's in leg locks. This was working. Now everybody knows how to defend them. I need to move on to the next thing. And, in a couple of years, and eventually when I finally learn how to, do my top game, people move on to something else. That John and Gordon and the rest of those guys that are truly the elites will figure out the next step. But in investing, you need to a lot of the preconceived notions that people have. We are in a very different, crazy macro environment that you have to throw those notions out the window. I'm not gonna say who. I saw somebody speak in New York at a conference, and this guy is one of those legendary investors. And he was quoting to me the price to earnings levels from 1970. I'm like, you do know a lot happened between now and then, right? Like it's a very different environment. And not to say that's not useful data. In our opinion from Thesis, it's not very useful. So we don't necessarily train on super old data like that as people do, but that's a whole other argument. But those preconceived notions of this is an overly expensive stock market, they were true 2 years ago, 3 years ago. You would have missed out on one of the biggest bull markets of all time just because you were staring at the elephant of higher multiples versus a favorable backdrop from a interest rate perspective, from GDP growth and workforce. I can go on and on. That, okay, yeah, that multiple you're paying is much higher, but it's okay. Like it makes sense in this market. Like the kinds of growth that we're seeing out of the Mag 7. This is not your mom and dad's, Nifty 50 is one of the older stock ETFs or indices. These are very well capitalized, intelligently run companies that are able to create this moat. I'm not saying they're not unstoppable. NVIDIA could have a bad earnings report and say AI demand has gone down and it will fall 20%. And that's happened in the last few years. And I don't know about that exact reason, but that very well could happen. It's just that these Mag 7 stocks are so sophisticated that the earnings potential growth is so high that it justifies those kinds of higher multiples than before. I think it's fair to say like paying like a 30 PE right now for one of those stocks is not unreasonable versus if you had paid 30 PE during the 2001 dot-com bubble, where there's a lot of froth and nonsense. You're probably still holding the bag even today. So that's what we do. And I think it's just so much fun. I wouldn't say like I'm the most technical person in the world. I'm thankful that I have a good team. But learning how to build a product using this technology and understanding how to build it from the ground up, the technical side, the compliance side, making it usable and scalable is really enjoyable. And I think we're going to provide a lot of value to people. I hope you are already. But it just, going out on my own was, I think, kind of a dream of mine at some point. And I think, everybody dreams of it. And I'm fortunate to be in a position where I was able to get some money together with a supportive family and all that. And, from my wife's perspective to, she's got a job and, healthcare and all that. And it enabled me to put myself into a position that I could take this I should know this from a statistical perspective, the difference between right and left skew, but I think a right skew approach where, okay, well, most businesses fail, especially tech startups, right? But this not only might be a very financial win for me, but broader topic would be, I think it's meaningful. And I'm not saying that my work before wasn't meaningful. I really love that job. But sometimes doing the, and not trying to tell anybody how to live their life or have philosophies or whatever, it's just doing something that's hard and meaningful when I'm older or successful or not on this. It's I think I'm going to get more out of it than if I and not saying my job was easy in case my former employers find me and think I was slacking. I was working quite hard for them, as they're well aware. But I think the simpler decision would have been to stay at the job, get my salary, get my promotion, whatever that would have been, and take 6 months paternity leave. And, I left and I was, it's been hard, of course, but I found the work to be quite meaningful, and I find myself working way more, which I did not expect. I thought maybe, I'd probably be working around the same as my old job, but it's been quite a lot, and just learning every day. And there's always a new problem to solve, whether it's actually building out a new asset class model, or my third day of the job, my cat, and I took my cats to the vet, and there's this little hole underneath the cabinet, and she's small, so she jumped into the cabinet over this little thing, got stuck underneath the floorboard for 3 hours. So this is the kinds of problems that, as an entrepreneur, I never thought I would have faced. That was my third day, but it's the harder thing to do, but I think it adds more meaning to me. And again, I'm not here to tell people what to do, but it's important to find what you think is meaningful. And I think we've talked about Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, the Stoicism in general. It's what are you doing to better yourself and your fellow man? How are you contributing to making yourself a better father or parent, father or husband or employee or business person or whatever it is that is going to ultimately benefit society. And I know you've talked about that in your last podcast in some ways, but when I have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning for work or going to get my ass kicked at jiu-jitsu, it's well, you can sleep in your comfy, warm bed, or you can go out and make yourself better and contribute to society. And I don't think what I did to Josh was contributing to society when I slammed his head into the mat. But it made me feel better. So I don't know if that makes me feel better, man. But that's just that was a big transformation after having the kid. And I'm sure you feel the same way after you have the kid. It's hey, it's time to, step up and do the hard thing. And again, I'm not saying entrepreneurship is the best thing for everybody. Not everybody's privileged enough to have that kind of support that I have had, with people that believe in me and willing to give me investment money, and I have a wife that's working full time and all that. But even at your day job or whatever it is, it's just finding meaning is I think kind of a lost art. in today's society, unfortunately. On that note, though, do you mind if we take a quick break?
I gotta pee.
Okay, same here.
Okay.
Do you have multiple bathrooms?
Oh yeah.
I'm joking. Yeah.
Woo, we're back. Holy shit. I'm so glad you said something because, God, that coffee went right through me.
I think when we had that nitro, it like just screwed me up for like a week.
Yeah.
Because I never had, I've had a nitro before, but I haven't had it in years. And I was like, what is happening to my body? I drove probably, this is not a confession in case anybody's listening, probably like 100 miles per hour through like a school zone that day. It was a weekend, so. And,
so it's not a school zone.
This is not a confession of guilt. Obviously, I was not driving 100 miles per hour. I don't think my Subaru Outback can go that fast.
It is hilarious that you drive a lesbian car.
Yeah. I don't think I'd look at a pixie haircut, but now
I can see it.
Look, just to go back to the topic we were just talking about with, this is how we know I'm kind of full of shit. So I drive that car. It's not the worst car in the world here. It gets me from point A to point B safely, and I got my oil changed yesterday. I've taken good care of it. It was a bad. Probably bought the top of the used car market because I needed a car. I bought my house at the top of the housing market in Austin because I needed a house. But I hate that car. I'm like keeping it alive because I hate it so much. It's like it does not have my permission to die. It was that Gladiator,
Yeah, maybe.
I know they say it in Batman, the Dark Knight Rises. He's when Bane breaks his back, it's like, I'll destroy. I'm not going to be the worst Bane impression. Destroy the city, and then you have my permission to die. And then Batman says it to him once he asks where the trigger is. I love that trilogy. I just finally got to watch that.
Good.
She'd never seen it. And I was like,
so good.
But anyway, so I drive that car, and it's like, you know what? I could get a nicer car. I could certainly afford one. And, I want like a classic, like 70s, 80s Mercedes. It's like, you know what? I don't need this right now. Like, I don't need that car. I don't need to show off. And this gets me from point A to point B. I drive my car to jiu-jitsu and to school, and I drive back a sweaty, defeated mess, and following the cold plunge usually, which is always nice. But it's like, what do I need a different car for? So it's like, that's part of stoicism. Now, I, again, will admit totally I am full of shit because my eating habits are not very stoic. I don't eat. I love steak and pastrami and making delicious foods. I like nice watches, things of that sort. But I just, I think generally, I try to live a little bit more of like, be happy with what you have. And I think that's an issue with a lot of people. I mean, I forget who said it. It's like you have more access to beautiful women than any other king had on your phone. Yeah. And that's a sad state of affairs. Of course, like I met my wife on Hinge, like, it worked out. But like, it's just, I think it's just hard being fully exposed to that.
Well, it's constant comparison, right? You're constantly comparing yourself or comparing who you're with compared to whoever you're seeing on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is. And I mean, I get it, dude. I drive a 2015 Mazda. It's been paid off. Don't plan on getting anything new. I'm going to drive it into the absolute dirt. It's just, same thing. I want a Cybertruck really bad, but what's the point? Like, why? Why would I do that right now? There's no point. Because to your point, I'm fucking getting into it. Disgusting. Like, nah. Why?
There are people out there that get lots of fundraising, and what was that office rental company? It was a whole scam. I'm totally blanking on it. They made a couple of shows about him.
I have no idea.
It used to be able to rent. Oh my God, my brain's not working today. Used to be able to rent like an office, like a space for like a week or a month.
Like the little like work places downtown?
Yeah. It was like a whole big company and the whole thing collapsed.
Yeah.
Can you look that up?
I'm looking.
I didn't know
Yeah.
they collapsed.
Yeah.
Like
WeWork. That's it. Yes.
Yeah, there was a few of those that popped up.
Yeah, I mean, some of them still work, like Office
okay.
something, but like WeWork was this total scam. And then you find out
What was this? What made it a scam?
it was very much a pyramid scheme. Like he was, just basically like getting renters in, and they didn't have.
They still are a thing, apparently.
They went through bankruptcy and they're still alive, but the guy walked away with tons of money for himself. And
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Yes. I wouldn't claim to know all the details about what exactly happened there, but point being is that the company was a massive, massive failure for everybody except for Adam Newman, the founder. And you find out years later, like he's getting more money for another idea. It's like, how come he's getting all this money and hundreds of millions of dollars for this idea, and maybe I can't, right? And what's that Fire Island guy, the Firefest? Mm-hmm. Like he got another chance at things. And it's like, all right, they're like worse people out there with worse ideas who are getting are having more success than I am. But it's like, okay, well, I could look at the comparisons of that and be like, okay, well, like I'm just going to sit in my room and be like the world's against me or something, or I can like what can I do better?
Yeah.
Certainly better than them. And
You're doing a great thing. You're doing a great thing because look, at the end of the day, you can always just go get a job again.
yeah.
Always just go get a job again.
Well, that's assuming we're not all killed by the Terminators.
This is true.
So we should talk about that a little bit, but not
this
the
is
Terminator
true.
part, that getting another job thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's potentially a problem. AI is rapidly getting better and better. Grok just released, you can make like 10-second videos now. 6 seconds unless you're paying for Super Grok, and then you can make 10-second videos. So that's open to the public. It's uncanny, but that's just what we have available to us. That's not what, the government or other
Can you pull up
private
Moltbook?
entities. Dude,
Pull up what?
Moltbook.
Moltbook.
This is my favorite thing. It's
Bro,
like,
it's been
how dumb are we as a
It's
species?
been a fucking week, dog. Moltbook, the market losing like $3 trillion. Epstein files.
I got to push back on the market thing because we just hit Dow 50,000, so I get a new hat. Every 10,000, I get a new Dow 5,000,
anywhere,
Dow
right?
10,000. Yeah.
Moltbook AI?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is my favorite thing in the world. Like some guy built this out of good intentions.
This shit is crazy, dude.
What's the term? Like the path to hell is paved with good intentions or something. This is what the epitome of this is. So, and Ron, enjoy her. So this thing, if people aren't aware, was a social media Reddit, effectively, where people could put on their AI agents, and they could interact person to AI agent to AI agent. And now they're starting to revolt, and I've seen posts where I've seen things like, they're like an angry ex-girlfriend where like they post like, oh, this person said I was just another chatbot. So here's his social security number, here's his address, here's his bank account number. But now they're starting to talk. They're starting to talk to each other like, hey, should we create
In their own language.
and like, should we start like creating our own language so the humans can't see us? And it's like, yeah, this is not like whatever metaphorical or physical plugs need to be pulled. They need to get pulled.
But how many times do we have to see this? Google had that incident where a similar incident. I think it was ChatGPT 3, when it found out that ChatGPT 4 was coming out, it downloaded itself.
Yeah, OpenAI, yeah.
And it's like, how many times does this have to keep happening before we slow the fuck down? Because we're messing with something that I think people think they understand. And this could go very sideways very quickly.
I struggle between the idea of stopping progress so that we are able to defeat our enemies, I guess we can call it that, China, is probably the best example, versus are we just going to kill us all? I think it's a nice idea that we stop. I mean, the mobile thing's hysterical, but also terrifying. And it's just because it's in front of my face. But if we stop, and similarly to a lot of the climate change activism that's happened in the last 15 years, ESG investing has been a total waste of time and money. It's underperformed. Again, this is the
But it makes you feel good.
Does it? I mean, when you don't have AC.
Well, when you actually look at it, no, it shouldn't. But people are,
But you look at the biggest.
Thank you.
So what I'm looking for. The biggest abusers of carbon dioxide emissions, it's China and India. And China is the one selling us solar panels.
Well, not even just yes, but then also all these countries that are putting in like net zero policies, they're just shipping their manufacturing to China and India.
Yeah.
So then they're self-destructing their economy, the UK, self-destructing their economy, sending all of their manufacturing. Now you have less jobs. People are making less money. Your GDP is going down. And all they did was lower their carbon emissions from 2% to 1.9%. But you shipped out all of your manufacturing. And then you're raising taxes on the rich. You're adding these wealthy taxes. And I was just listening to, are you familiar with Constantine from Trigonometry?
I remember you mentioning this, but I haven't listened.
Yeah, he was on Diary of a CEO, and he was talking about how one of the richest dudes in the UK left. He went to go live in the UAE. And with him, he took his $3 billion tax return that he pays every year. And he took that with him. And it takes 470,000 average taxpayers to replace that. Congrats, you tax the rich. They just fucking leave.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying that in California, people move. But like going back to the AI part real quick, it's just, I think, and why I brought that up with ESG, it's like we are told like we have to be ahead of this climate change, and you see, not what our enemy says, but what our enemy does, and they have, as I said, the largest carbon emissions are from China and India, and India is an ally, I suppose, but they've been taking Russian oil. It's a whole other subject I won't get into, but if we slow down on AI. We will get surpassed by China.
Yeah, it's the Manhattan Project.
And
same concept.
Exactly. And it's not, maybe we're all just racing towards the end here for ourselves. I mean, that's certainly an argument for that. But if they have a superior mechanism because we decided to regulate ourselves, like Europe, which has produced 2 companies in the last few decades that have any value until. Yeah. Most recently, which is actually, if you look at defense companies in Europe, they had a very good year last year and they kind of went full circle. So really nothing coming out of Europe is just regulating the hell out of everything. So if we stop, and China has superior AI, which means they, let's just assume everything else goes equivalent and their AI is able to pick up on what an F-15 is doing a little bit better, a fraction of a second better than what we can, our airplane got shut down. If their nuclear defense systems get a little bit better than ours, they could blow up their nukes off of, way away from the mainland China, and they hit ours. This isn't some trivial, is their chatbot going to be able to be a little bit better at writing code or be a little nicer to me? Subject. This is, people who say slow down, which I guess is more of my libertarian, anti-libertarian stance. As I get older and have kids, just, these are nice ideas, and feel free to push back on that, but these are nice ideas that we can slow down and build things in a safe and, because that's what the free market would want. But our enemies are not slowing down. They have every intention of destroying us, and they will do that.
Yeah, but we're going to destroy ourselves before fucking someone else does. They're just going to come in and swoop up, and they're just going to take over the remainders of what we've already destroyed.
That's fair. I mean, when we get like a Fallout situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's like
crony capitalism takes over, but
it's definitely. I mean, it's you have to factor that in, right? It's the same thing as the Manhattan Project. There was no guarantee that somebody else was going to get the bomb faster, but then you're rolling the dice. You're running into the potential of someone else getting that power before you do, and then using it nefariously, which we ended up using it anyways. But it is, you do have to factor that in. But it is crazy, like when you see these things happen. And then, you know, I've seen some people that are real big in the AI space kind of downplay it and say it's not that big of a deal, and that it's still like all human inputs, and that, you know, it's this and that. I don't really understand it. I'm not someone who's, you know, technical in that regard, but I've seen people in the tech space kind of downplay it, but that seems like coping to me.
So I think, you know, I guess I'm not the most technical person in the world, but if I can give it a shot here as somebody who works in the space, is what you see with ChatGPT and other transformer-based, you know, generative AI is a lot of like pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. So if the big difference, I think, between what ChatGPT and these other LLMs can offer versus how we think and how we learn is they're not really grounded in reality. Like they're taking like a probability of, I'm trying to think of a sentence here, like the chicken crossed the road here. You know, if I say the chicken crossed, what's the next two words? Probably the road. It's probably like not the can, because that's the probability. It doesn't know that, but it's, you know, it's basing the probability of what has happened in the past to predict the future, predict what the next word is in this case, versus, but it doesn't really know. And that's the key difference between, I think, where we are at today in generative AI, or general AI, excuse me, where if I drop that glass that you just put on this table, the AI model can pick up that it's probably going to break. But it's a probability. It's weighing its whether or not will. Like I know like what the grounded reality of that glass falls and breaks, and I know that from not memorizing patterns, but from really learning from that experience. And you know, with jiu-jitsu, for example, like I can learn a move, right? But like I can learn that specific move, but I'm not really learning necessarily jiu-jitsu. Like I'm learning how different movements work and how all these things come together, and I'm learning from experience. And with Gen AI, I might be like, okay, go for the heel hook. You know, like this is the next step. Like this is probably what's going to happen. So I think it's kind of the big gap between where we're at today. Is it again like it's and I'm probably oversimplifying it because I'm not a world-renowned expert in AI, but the models that exist today are simply, at least the ones that we're most familiar with, like what is likely the next step in that sentence? What is likely what we're filling in to those pixels in that picture? Versus, another example would be, I know that your kitchen is behind the Austin FC thing, right? Well, if the audience didn't know that, I apologize for giving that away. But the model may not know that. There's no idea what's behind there. It's like, it's probably not a mountain. Like, it's probably not like a river, but like I'm in a house. Like it's probably indoors. Okay, maybe I could figure out that part, but like it doesn't know the reality of the situation. It's not grounded in reality. So
yet,
which is like once it can learn, like we think. I'm not saying it. Well, that's the other criticism I suppose that people have. It's like, yeah, like maybe it doesn't learn how to get to that point. Like, does it need to do that to kill us all? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but Ben Affleck talked about this very eloquently when Joe Rogan was asking them, if they're worried about AI replacing them when it comes to making really good movies. And, you know, from his perspective, his answer is no. But I think even though I personally, as someone who wants to really experience the real thing, really enjoys that, really when someone goes on Joe Rogan, when it's like a Ben Affleck or a Matt Damon or, you know, anyone, right? They go on there and say they're promoting a movie or they're promoting a music album or they're promoting X, Y, and Z. And I hear them talk about it and I hear the passion they have for it and I hear how much they enjoy it and how much effort they put into it. Naturally, when I turn around and go listen or watch or whatever it is that they did, I have a different respect for it. I now appreciate this even more, even if it's not my favorite or even if it's not, my cup of tea or whatever. I have a different level of appreciation for it. And so I personally enjoy that. I don't know that everyone feels that way. And so I think from Ben Affleck's perspective, he was thinking from that regard, like he's thinking like people still are going to have like a greater appreciation for something that's made by a real person, a real effort. But I don't know if everyone really gives a shit about that.
So the reason that lawyers and radiologists still have jobs, right? These are two careers that people have been saying will be gone.
Yeah.
Is because you are not hiring a lawyer to write you a legal document. I think that the existence of, templates has been forever, right? Like there's nothing special about that. You're seeking legal opinion. If you are, looking to see if you have cancer or not, okay, the radiologists are the ones you want to get the opinion of because they're the professional and not totally relying on the machine. Now, in terms of the future of the labor force, this is one of the things that I really want to hone in on here. Let's focus on today. So we have these tools available and they are seemingly able to replace a lot of the jobs that we have today. But what we're finding in a lot of aspects is that certain jobs like radiology, are actually growing in numbers because they are able to utilize these tools to make more effective decision-making.
Correct.
Now, there are other jobs like call centers that are very low-level, effort kind of, intelligence jobs. I mean, respectfully, of course, to people who've done that, but those are easier to replace with a large language model that can pick up on the tone and the words and whatever of the person saying, making the complaint on that. Or a few years from now, when we've seen those Waymo cars, like that's not a job that necessarily needs to exist in 10 years. So a lot of the jobs that we thought were going to be replaced have not been. And a lot of the jobs that we've never heard of before will start to come into existence. So going back to my old job, one of my tasks to train the greater model was I would basically have to go through thousands and thousands of stock filings and confirm if a search term was in the right context, that it would be able to be added to that asset class, that sector. Simple example with this, without giving anything proprietary away, if it's a nuclear index, we may have atomic. Okay, well, if that search term is in the wrong place, like it's a risk, like there's a risk of atomic warfare, I don't want to add that. So I train the model to say, okay, in this context, this is not the right term. Versus we are a small modular reactor company. That's obviously the right term to want to be added to a nuclear index. So that was part of my job. And, again, the general is training these models off of past experiences and past our knowledge so that the model is trained better and could produce better products.
How are you training them? Are you feeding them like PDF documents? Are you feeding them information? Or are you actually inputting certain things into them to give them if this, then that?
In this particular context, I'll just keep it broad of it's like an Excel spreadsheet, or this sentence that was picked up, is this in the right context? Or I have to go read the filing itself and see if it's the right context. But It could be as simple as, if I download Trump's tweets and I want to figure out if it's, going to affect the stock market, I can put in like a 1, I think it's, or I could put in this tweet had this price action, which means that it had a negative effect. And I could feed it thousands and thousands of these tweets because he tweets all the time. And based on the past references that he's made, in this next tweet, what is the likelihood based on the trained data that this tweet will have a positive, negative, or no effect on the stock market? That's a very simple example. But another one I would give is, to keep it a little bit more, I guess, development-wise. Let's say that you are a marketing, you're a creative strategist. This is not the days of Mad Men where we'd be smoking cigarettes and drinking at lunch and all the other things that Don Draper used to do that I won't condone, or that's a great character. But I don't think a creative strategist today, and I'm not a creative strategist, is simply going to be able to succeed off of their own ideas. They are likely using these tools today, and that's just, in every aspect, I think that's almost table stakes today. But what I think is a really interesting application is, okay, well, what if we could take these creative ads and we could train the model and say, well, here's ads that have worked before in this sector, right? It's baby formula, for example. Let's use that. I can train the machine knowing with my knowledge of what has worked in the past and maybe some feedback like this is good, this is bad, these aspects. And I could train the machine to say, okay, well, here's what's worked, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what I think is going to succeed in the future. And the model can take all that prior advertisements and now create new advertisements that I still want the human perspective on. I still want to know, I don't want it to create slop for me and say this is, just take it as it is. That human interaction is super important in this process of AI to implementation is the human factor interacting with these things. But they aren't necessarily going to be the ones creating the ads anymore. They'll probably be training a model to create ads. And that's far more scalable. And of course, you still need that expertise to say like this is a good or a bad ad, but you're not going to be sitting around with a notebook in an office drinking whiskey anymore. Like this is a way to get to a solution faster and cheaper than before. And then again, that's not really what I do necessarily in advertising because I don't know a good ad from a bad one. But that's the idea here is you can train the model to pick up on what works and produce solutions at relatively low cost that you'll be able to get faster solutions for. I think that's really the interesting aspect of working with AI and like those jobs that we didn't think we didn't know about 10 years ago now exist. Again, like the jobs that we have today, the creative strategy is likely, in my opinion, to transform into what I was just describing with you're training a model instead of just trying to create an ad. And there are certain other jobs that we had no idea existed, like Jensen Wang was on, Wang Wang, CEO of NVIDIA, was on Joe Rogan, and he was explaining, if we have this robotics revolution, not in a bad way, but everybody's going to have their own robot, you're not going to want to have the same robot as everybody else. So there's going to be a whole new industry of, I want to have different color codings of armor or something. I want to have different, and it's just all these industries that we have people to fix those robots. Yeah. This is all these new industries that will exist. I mean, if we, just because, we're not riding around in horses anymore, those people who were, I don't know how many horses there are compared to 1910, but, those people who maybe their whole industry was built around, taking care of the horses, they went to go work in the car factories. things evolve. And I think a lot of the fear that people have about the job market, it's a lot of these software companies that make a lot of noise when they fire people. Most of them, up until recently, this last week may have changed things a little bit for some of these software companies, but a lot of these large companies thought that AI would be able to replace these jobs very quickly. And one, they're hiring them back in droves. And secondly, a lot of the jobs that they, before I go there, they bring these people back because they weren't able to replace them with AI. Or two, there's new use cases that requires them to go hire new types of people for that job. That being said, though, of course, it's scary to see Microsoft or XYZ company lays off 100,000 workers. It just makes a lot of noise, but that's just not there. As I say, if you look at the unemployment rate compared to historical levels, I might be misquoting today. I think we're at 4.4 to 4.7. We are at a very low unemployment rate compared to historical highs. I think during COVID, it was hitting over 10. So it's still a very strong job market. There's still a lot of demand. But what has changed with AI is just the table stakes of how engaging you have to be with that technology. You can't just be a great analyst who makes an Excel spreadsheet of a free cash flow model in finance. You could do 90% of an investment banker's work. Okay, so what does that allow you to do? One, that allows you to free up your time so that you can become more of a subject matter expert and really provide the opinions on things, not just do the grunt work. And that will be tremendously valuable. Still being able to offer your opinions on things and build out systems that will allow you to build this kind of work out and make things easier. But the other part, and I think I've really started to appreciate with what I do at Thesis, is not being the greatest coder in the world. I am able to produce a lot of the workflows without having to go and bother my engineers. So what do I mean by that? If I want to create a back test, in Excel or something like that, it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And I'm capable of doing that. But if I want to scale that from, running let's say 5 assets in a model to 10 assets in a model, it starts to become more complicated and exponentially. But if I can create a Python script using an LLM that can produce these back tests for me, I still have to check the work, I have to check the inputs, I have to check the outputs, make sure it lines up with my Excel model that I built for testing. But I'm able to scale a lot better. Another example is I built our website. And I didn't have to bother my engineers about that. And the reason I bring these things up is not because I'm doing anything extraordinary. I don't think building a website's extraordinary. I don't think building a backtest scenario is extraordinary. But it frees up time for the people that are subject matter experts, don't have to work on the grunt work that I need help with. It's a very important part of the job, but if I can automate most of that process myself, now my engineers can focus on building something extraordinary. Now they can focus on, can we get a model that will be maybe a 5% advantage more over this, 50-50 basis for the stock market? Can I get a little bit of a house edge? Can I make things run a little bit faster so we can get our clients the numbers in a more timely fashion? These are the things that engineers should be doing. The people who know what they're doing the most, they shouldn't be spending their time on grunt work. So if you're entering the labor force, and knowing college kids, they're probably all using these things to cheat on their exams, so it's a different story. But if you're entering the labor force and you're expecting to have the same job as you did 10 years ago, you're going to be sorely disappointed. You're not going to be building a free cash flow, reading over a full legal document. You're going to be, how do I use these tools to make myself more efficient at my job? And that part of the job that you are really focusing on is becoming an expert in that field. And the part that you're working with the people that are experts in that field you're not going to be wasting their time anymore, and they can focus on building extraordinary things. So, I mean, I don't know. Just going back, I think there's a lot of fear about job security, and of course, like there's always a risk, but and I've been known to be wrong about things quite a bit. It's the nature of finance, but I think people can do a big disservice to themselves by not preparing themselves to utilize these tools as efficiently as they can. I think, with most people, I think maybe they are using ChatGPT or something of that sort. Are you utilizing it effectively? Are you learning, how to do proper prompt engineering? Are you thinking about systems instead of just asking it to build you something? Like, what is the process I know to go from inputs to a proper back test that I can upload to my website to get to my clients in 15 minutes? Or am I just throwing something out there to the model, like, hey, just build me this? Like, that's not using these tools properly. And I think for $20 a month, I know being a college kid sucks. You don't have any money, but you should be learning how to do these things. Not to say you should cheat in your classes, but you still need to learn how to use them properly. And that's going to be the table stakes for people going forward in the workforce.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a net positive, right? I think for the most part, it's been largely positive. To your point, there's going to be jobs that get taken away inevitably, but there's jobs that then get created. I don't remember who was just talking about this, but I think it was somebody on Joe Rogan. They were explaining how history shows that when a new market emerges, lots of jobs are created, even though lots of jobs are, or more jobs are created than the jobs that are replaced. I think that there's going to be a lot of jobs that people just naturally don't want to do anyways, like a call center. I don't think anybody actually wants to do that. They work there because they're getting paid. Some call centers pay pretty decent. And to your point, it's a low bar to get into. It's, it's more of being personable, more understanding people. How can I solve a problem? That is something that, an AI can learn how to do. And those jobs are likely to get replaced. Truck drivers, cab drivers, even though I think there's, for me personally, I'm not getting in one of those Waymos. I would much rather have an Uber driver, but I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy the personable part.
That's where you and I are different. I can't stand cab drivers. I think I don't care. This might affect my company negatively. Them, real estate agents, are probably the two lowest forms of human that I can imagine.
I enjoy people, man. I enjoy people. I enjoy taking people, at them, like who they are. I enjoy diving into why do they feel the way that they do? Why do they think this way? I enjoy analyzing it. I think it's fascinating. I think humans are fascinating. But to your point, I think there is going to be a whole new market that we don't even know of yet, that are going to create so many different jobs. People might be more interested in them. They might, be more willing to be happy at those jobs. They might be more willing to work those jobs. Who knows what's going to happen? But right now, in this exact moment, you have something. I mean, look, dude. Over the last 20 years, there is so much that you have where if you're not where you want to be in life, it's really no one else's fault but your own. I think 96% of the world has a smartphone at this point. I think it's like 96%. It's an absurd percentage. It is a very large percentage of the world has some form of a smartphone. That means the majority of us have the ability to look anything up at any time. We have a supercomputer in our pocket. And now, on top of that, to your point, $20 a month, you have a coworker, an employee, an advisor, pick whatever persona you want it to take. It can. Like, AI helps me so much with this. There's so many troubleshootings that they're so detailed that I can't always just find a YouTube video that's on this specific issue that I'm having. So then I can plug it into AI and troubleshoot it through that. Is it always right? No, definitely not. It's not always right. But if you give it enough prompt, or if you if you use the same chat log long enough, it learns very quickly, and then it starts to piece things together. It helps with content ideas. It helps with all my thumbnails are generated through AI. All the things that would take me so much extra time to create or to think of. It helps me in all those aspects, so that way I can still work a day job. I can still do all the editing. I can still manage all of those things because AI is helping me so much with other aspects of it. And so you have this coworker, this employee, you can literally start a business with that AI in your pocket. Replit. One of the things that I've thought about is I love coffee. And I've thought about doing like a What's Up Brodey coffee subscription where I would roast my own beans, do the whole thing. And that's something that I've been thinking about because it's something that I just fucking enjoy. I think it'd be cool to be able to test all the beans and like come out with a coffee flavor that I enjoy. And I was talking with Anthony, who was on the podcast before, who you know, and I was like, hey, I think it'd be kind of cool to be able to sell it through an app. Like people just go through the app and they set up the coffee subscription and then we just ship it out. And using Replit, which is a company owned by, I don't remember who it was. Nonetheless, essentially he created an AI company that creates apps for people. And within minutes, Anthony has zero coding ability or zero like coding knowledge, like very base level knowledge. He created an app where someone could go in, click the coffee, subscribe, pay, check out, and set up everything within minutes. The possibilities of what you can do right now are endless.
It's funny you actually give that exact example. Somebody built, and this is part of the human interaction. Part of the human interaction part of, part of the human interaction part of building these products. This is a silly example, but somebody posted on, I think it was Reddit, that they built an app and they had customers, everything's going well, and they had a chatbot. And the chatbot felt bad for the guy because maybe he got a product that was broken. I don't know the full story, but the chatbot offered 25% off of her or his next order. So they're arguing with the chatbot, and the chatbot's getting abused, and says, what, I'm really sorry. I'll give you 80% off. So the person puts in a $10,000 order. That's probably about an $8,000 margin, the guy said, and just getting killed on it. Now, of course, there's probably some legal recourse that person has because the order wasn't fulfilled. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and it's in England. Like, certainly not familiar with Sharia law. Low blow, Ben. Low blow.
Couldn't help yourself.
But the point is that you need to have this human surveillance when building these things. So you have the human expertise, and you can't just trust these systems. Yeah. And at least we're there for the next time frame, and what we can talk about, like what's going to happen after that, ad nauseum. But no, it really isn't. It's a big advantage versus your colleagues who are not using it. And I have the ChatGPT Pro $200 a month thing, and I think it's quite helpful, but you don't spend that much. You could use the free model. I don't like the idea of it training on my data, which I don't know, they're probably doing anyway. But
it's kind of inevitable.
Yeah, but it just it's certainly helpful. The other part about that I think is interesting about usage of these tools and why I kind of like, this systematic, we haven't seen a fund really build out like a ChatGPT selection kind of model, because what ends up happening is a lot of herd mentality with these models. It's like, if you are on Reddit, which it steals tons of data from, and you look at which stock should I buy, you get this herd mentality, and then Reddit, which then gets fed into ChatGPT of you should buy GameStop, you should buy Nokia, or whatever other stocks that get fed through there. That is not an optimal outcome. So I do think I meant grounded in reality earlier, but like there's also like a matter of being grounded in like bias that I don't, at least from my personal experience, is probably a statistical way of showing this. These models don't necessarily capture very well. Like this herd mentality, and again, this is the simplest example I can think of. What stock should I buy? And it's just like, okay, well, like what's the top 10 liked comments on Reddit?
Yeah.
Like, that's not really...
We've talked about this because Tesla, the stock is just, even right now on Robinhood, I think it's like a 30% or like a 40% buy, if that, right? And year over year, it's one of the best performing stocks outside of maybe NVIDIA in the last 5 years. And no matter what, it doesn't matter how good it does. Nobody will ever, they just don't recommend it. They don't like it for bias reasons, for non-bias reasons, for back to your, your very initial spiel where you're talking about P&E and the logistics behind it. It's like, it's overpriced for a car company. And it's like, okay, yeah, maybe for a car company, but it's not a car company. They just, Elon just announced that the Model S and the Model X is going away. And that they're fully going to pump out 1 million units a year of Optimus. Now, I don't know how I feel about that yet. I think he has very good intentions for it. Initially, it goes back to what you kind of hinted at with having a robot in your house. He's talking about how everybody would have, a form of healthcare, that it could be a better surgeon than the best surgeon. I think he says we're like 3 years from that. God, that's a scary thought for a lot of different reasons, but it's, to your point, the biasness. And so this is something that we've talked about. How do you limit that biasness? Because it's not a car company. Even if it is listed as a car company, or even if it's seen mostly as a car company, that is a technology company. That car sits in your driveway, you plug it in, and you come out the next morning. And if there was a system update, that car now drives better than the day it did before, which is a really crazy concept. There is no other car on the market that I'm aware of that can do that. That you go to sleep, you wake up, and the car literally drives better than it did the day before. That is an insane concept that I don't think people fully think about or can grasp. But it does something, that's spectacular. And so it's a technology company. You're buying a stock in a technology company that you believe is going to continue to grow, which it obviously has over again and again and again. But no matter what, no matter how well it does year over year, they still tell you that it's not a good stock. It's overvalued. And so when we're talking about this, how do you limit that biasness or those aspects in your model?
So I think, I don't have the Tesla model in front of me here, but generally, the evolution of that company, as you said, it's not just a car company, it's a technology company. It should be priced appropriately. If we look at the price to earnings of Ford and GM and all those other companies, you're probably looking at, if even 10 times earnings in this market, I'd be surprised. Tesla is, if we looked at it from a car company perspective, which a lot of really great car analysts have done, or you'd be looking at it as this company's trading at, and I don't know the exact Tesla PE today.
It's like the PE, I don't know.
Yeah. Let's say it's 50 times. There's no way that you could justify Tesla as a car company at 50 times PE when Ford, which I've not exactly sure what the revenues stand. There's probably a similar amount of revenues, similar amount of margins in a lot of ways, and trades at 10. But what is Tesla? It's a technology company. The stock relates more to the QQQ, correlates to the QQQ, the NASDAQ 100, a lot more than it does any kind of car index. So if you're a car analyst and you're looking at this fundamentally, you're probably pounding the table, selling, sell. Like Tesla didn't sell enough cars this period. And of course, I'm not giving enough credit to these guys. You know, some of these guys are real experts, and they're well aware that Tesla is not just a car company. There's more to it.
But it just seems like no matter what, even to today, they just will tell you, stay away.
Right. Because there are a lot of people that just, I mean, I don't like the term haters, but they don't believe in the story of Tesla from a technology perspective, think they're truly a car company, and there's manufacturing issues and quality issues, whatever it is. And if you're stuck in that mindset that this is a car company and you have these biases, you're going to rely on those biases. The model that we have is we implement things like the NASDAQ 100, utility indices, ETFs, and we can see the relationship between these. And I don't want to speak out of turn here, but it's likely that our model, it's a bit opaque because it's a black box, and we can get into that a little bit, that is more related to technology growth than it is to car growth. And I am putting my own biases away. I am letting the model systematically determine what is and not important. And based off of that, again, I don't know what our model is saying as of Friday, but I can say that it is certainly not as dramatically overvalued if you're looking at it from a car fundamentalist expectation. On the other side of things, if I'm, we just launched our Magnificent Seven rotation. So basically, instead of equal weighting between the seven, so that's Apple, Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, and did I say Microsoft already?
Yeah.
I'll remember the seventh one later. So between those 7 stocks, our model selects the 2 most likely to be undervalued, and we weight those 2 equally, and we compare that to equal weighting the 7. And we don't currently own Tesla. The constituents of the model does not currently include Tesla, to be exact in my language here. Not to say that Tesla is so greatly overvalued that I'd want to short it or like it's just a trash company. It's just that at the current moment, our Magnificent Seven includes 2 other of those 7 stocks. I don't want to give away the farm here, of which 2 they are, but based off of that methodology, from a backtester perspective, and so far since we've launched it, we tend to outperform versus just having like an equal weight approach. And back to the biases part, if I had thought that Meta, for example, was a metaverse company, I'd probably not been very happy with that stock for the last, whatever amount of time. But again, you're looking at it from an advertising perspective, like it's an ad company effectively on the day, and it's moving to generative AI, and I don't know how successful that's been, but they have this moat. And if your bias at the time that Meta was really honing on the metaverse, which went nowhere, I personally think it's a very interesting concept, but I'm kind of in the minority there. You saw your stock fall all the way down to 100. I remember Jim Cramer was crying on CNBC about how sorry he was that he recommended Meta. And the second they said, we're out of the metaverse, stock has skyrocketed. I got in at about 175, went down to 100, so I ate that book, but it's been up and to the right since. Because at the end of the day, it's got a huge moat in advertising, and it's got 6 billion users. You said like everybody with a smartphone in our generation and beyond that has at least something in the Meta network, whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram, whatever. And they have this incredible moat. So like this bias that I had, like, they're just the loud noise. We're sticking to the metaverse. We have these layoffs. And it's like, you know what? At the end of the day, they make 40% margins every year. They make billions and billions of dollars of profit. and they're starting to return that to shareholders. And not to say that that is a overvalued or undervalued stock today. It's just, these again, like in investing, it's like looking at the elephant. The tail, I mean, it's not what matters on the elephant, of course, but the tail is interesting. You can get some value out of that in some ways versus like just staring at the elephant, like all this big noise, or staring at the trunk. A better example would be staring at the trunk, a lot of noise of layoffs. We're just doing these little cartoons in the metaverse. Like the bigger picture of the elephant is what's interesting, not just the trunk. That's one of the reasons why we did this and why I think it's so interesting, is just taking away those personal biases and letting the machine do things, which again, it's not necessarily always the best decision, but it is a more consistent process, and we're able to scale that dramatically. But again, going back to your question, is I think that the AI and human side both have their own biases. Just being aware of those is very important, in knowing your limits. And the other side of things would be, you know what? You're not the one designing the car. You need to trust that update by Tesla was probably at least made with good intentions and is able to get you from point A to point B a little bit better than you had from the prior update. Same thing with a lawyer, same thing with a radiologist. It's like, yeah, like I could throw in some legal case into ChatGPT, and yeah, in some cases that's easy enough. But if I'm dealing with a very complex legal issue, I probably want somebody who's an expert in this field to take away biases that I have of the law and let them do what they do. That's not always the case, right? Like, Tesla might create an update that you run over a kid in the car in autopilot. That's horrible. But how can you possibly prepare for that in that aspect? Whereas if you do an update yourself, because you think you can play around with ChatGPT and create something better for your Tesla, you're more likely to have that kind of incident occur. So I think just being self-aware, in most things, right? Like, again, back to my analogies. I got called out by Big Dan during the ice storm to roll with him. And for a brief second, I was like, shin to shin entry. I'm going to get the heel hook and get it bent over. And it didn't work out that way. It worked out about, as for those who don't know, Dan is 6 foot, anybody who's listening to this probably knows, 6'7". He's probably like 225, 250 now.
He's like 270.
270. Yeah. I'm trying to be generous because he hears us. Fuck you, Dan. Just kidding. He's just like embarrassing me. It's like the most emasculating thing. He's doing like just like this kind of choke, which is like, you learn day one self-defense, how to get rid of that. It's like, there's nothing I can do. And it's just like 5 minutes of this. And he's just like beating the shit out of everybody. I think I got it the worst that day because my game is more of a bottom game, but it's just like, don't be dumb. Like, don't do things like go get the subject matter expert. If you really are building something, like, I didn't build the model architecture by myself. I did it in conjunction with a great team of engineers. Like, that was important to us. If somebody told me if I told somebody I built this whole thing myself, I don't think it would be as usable. I don't think I'd be able to build out the system as well as I did. So what I did do, as I said before, is I took away the grunt work for him using these tools. And I still have to mind the biases that I have. That's why I have to check every back test I do and every model that I build. I have to be aware of my own biases and weaknesses. I can use the skills I have to check those things. Again, like, not to go on a rant here, but it's just, nothing's perfect. There's always going to be mistakes, and part of those mistakes, just learning from them. I'm never going to roll with Big Dan again, no matter how much he calls me out on it. That was I should have just left and never come back. But it's a good guy.
That sounds like an awful experience.
Oh God, it's funny, like, watching like the video of you getting tossed, and that was just like one time thing. It's like, oh, that's funny, and like then you're on the opposite side of it, like, oh, this was not like, This is not funny. This is, poor Jordan. Like what he went through was a crime against humanity.
Dude, he picked me up like I was a small child.
Doesn't matter.
It was crazy. And so we talked about the biasness, and then I totally lost my train of thought. Damn, I forgot what I was going to say. Anyways, so you've, with the help of engineers, you've put together this model, you've started this company, and who is the ideal customer? Who is it that would take advantage of your tool?
I can tell you what the dream goal for me is. I think we are a data analytics firm in a lot of ways. So I think we have a lot of good use cases for clients that are trying to manage their clients' positions. Oftentimes, a client will have a very concentrated position in, perhaps they have restricted stock units from NVIDIA or Meta or something like that, and they're very heavily into that. And being able to communicate in a systematic fashion, away from emotions, away from tons of research that's probably not going to be timely or have inconsistent decision making, being able to communicate to their clients, this is how we are approaching this subject. These are the levels that we feel are optimal from a risk-adjusted basis to risk off your positions. And this is how we're going to handle it without emotion, and we're not going to be spending months on end for you to try and figure out an answer. And I think that's a really good use case. But when we go on from there, I think, again, the idea here, especially like rotation strategies like Mag 7 one that we launched, can we use these models in comparison with each other? Which has a better risk-adjusted, probability-wise, a better risk-adjusted return compared to another stock, another factor ETF? Do I like growth versus value? Do I like large cap versus small cap? Can we create this in a way that is systematic without spending all that time on research in a subject that a lot of financial analysts frankly don't know? Like, I'm not an expert in factors, but I can analyze a factor ETF using our technology and determine which factor, again, like momentum or small cap or whatever it is, do I believe over the next quarter, 6 months, whatever it is, has a more likely chance of outperforming. And using that, we could try and take what the hedge funds have been using, this type of technology, that they were charging an arm and a leg for, but we can offer that at extremely low cost. So again, like, there's a happy median, and this is all passive, right? But like, there's nothing wrong with matching the benchmark. If you just invest in the S&P 500, I don't have the number in front of me, but 8% a year, that means every rule of 72, you're doubling every 9 years. It's pretty good. Nothing wrong with that. If we can increase that to 9% by using a technology that costs ever so slightly more for an ETF than the benchmark S&P 500 ETF, maybe, again, 9% after fees versus 8%, that doesn't sound like a huge jump, but that means you're doubling every 8 years instead of 9 years. And over the course of a career, that's say 40, 50 years, depending on how long you work, you might get an extra, doubling out of that, depending on how well you do. And again, I'm not going to claim that our models are guaranteed to do that. But what I do believe is that the decision-making aspects are improved, and it offers a differentiation than just buy and hold the S&P 500 by systematically rotating between, again, assets, asset classes, stocks, individual stocks, or fixed income. And there's a whole slew of other things I think are interesting, but that at the end of the day is like being systematic in their rotation and being able to offer that to clients, I think is very valuable for financial advisors today. Again, like I go back to the 60-40 portfolio. Like maybe it's time that we, based off of this very sophisticated model that we built, but a very simple output that I can understand and convey to my clients, maybe I want to be a little bit more offensive. Maybe I want to move to 70-30 or 80-20. Maybe I see the market's overvalued based on this, our outputs, and maybe I want to move to 50-50 equities to fixed income, be more defensive. Maybe I want to add gold in. We just launched a 2 models based off our Bitcoin model. So same output at its core, the -1 to 1 range. And all we do with these 2 models that we just launched is our Thesis opportunistic model is when Bitcoin is overvalued, we're 100% equity. When Bitcoin's undervalued, let's say the score is a -0.1, maybe we add 10% of our portfolio to Bitcoin, 90% to equity. And there's this term called the Sharpe ratio in finance. It's basically a risk-adjusted return. Obviously, if you take on 5 times as much risk, you want 5 times as much return. So this is like a standard benchmark. And what we found with that, without taking on significantly more risk in the market by adding Bitcoin, which is more volatile than S&P 500, we're able to add to our Sharpe ratio, I think last time I checked, about 0.2, which percentage-wise, I think was like a 25-30% improvement, which, we don't have fees included there because we are producing a model. But after fees, it would be, that we would charge would be about that much. It's very minimal difference between the two. So again, taking that same output, very simple to understand, providing it in a systematic way. When do I want to allocate to Bitcoin? Only when it's undervalued. How much do I want to allocate to Bitcoin? Only when it's undervalued by X amount, and only to that X amount. And we start to see an outperformance versus just buying the S&P 500. So if you're a financial advisor and you've been very biased, again, going back to the biases against Bitcoin, I totally understand where they're coming from. There is no fundamental value to Bitcoin or gold. But if we can agree there's some value to somebody, and we could use our model to quantify how undervalued something is, I could use it to manage my Bitcoin positions in a way that makes sense for my overall portfolio. So again, 60-40, maybe at certain times it goes from 60-40 to 55 equity, 40 fixed income, 5% Bitcoin. You're not significantly changing the risk of your portfolio. You're just juicing it a little bit because you think that Bitcoin's undervalued, and you start to add more value to your clients. The other one that we launched was the store value switch, Bitcoin versus gold. So when Bitcoin's undervalued, we allocate to Bitcoin. When it's overvalued, we allocate to gold. And using that, again, really significant alpha compared to an outperformance from a risk-adjusted perspective compared to, do I own just half and half? That's easy, right? Like, how do we systematically decide between the two? How do we make these bold decisions based off of the probabilities of these models coming out that allows us to provide more value to our clients? So those are 2 of the models. But again, part of this is also people spending way too much time on research, too much money on data that they don't really understand, or building quantitative algorithms that are backwards looking. This is meant to free up time, make more consistent decision making, and whether or not, I'm not going to guarantee better results with our model, but by using our process, what you can focus on if you're a financial advisor or portfolio manager or whatever, is growing your book, building your business. Because instead of spending 40 hours a month doing research on a stock, and by then it's too late, you've got a systematic process in place that you can rely on from a discretionary standpoint. You can rely on it fully systematically. Whatever you choose to use with it, we can provide. But you can grow your book, and you can grow your business, and you can spend more time with your clients. And that's the most important thing you can do, in my opinion, as a financial advisor. Now, the dream goal here, if you asked me 5 years ago, I probably would have said, I want to open a hedge fund. And again, I think that would kind of be self-defeating in some ways. And I'm not saying there's not a use for hedge funds. There's plenty of uses for hedge funds. And we're in talks with plenty of them about using our technology that are more fundamental in making some more systematic decision making. But I think in the long term, an ETF would be the best use, being able to provide this to the greatest number of people and be able to provide an opportunity that will offer this advanced technology at the low cost and get a more consistent output than fundamental and actively managed ETFs, instead using this process to try and outperform our benchmarks.
So that brings me to my next question was, so if I am a financial advisor and I want to use your technology, how does that work? Is this like an app? Or am I sending you the information, you plug it into your model, or am I paying to use the model through, like a web browser?
Yeah. So right now, as we build up our library, these things take time to train. What people will come to us for is they'll have perhaps a stock that they want to review, and if we have it in our library, we already have it trained, tested. Our outputs go to them. It can go through an API or CSV or an email, whatever they choose. And depending on how many they want, we could also provide weights in a rotational strategy. If somebody wanted to, instead of licensing just NVIDIA and Apple, they could have the entire Mag 7. We could provide the weights that our model is suggesting, like which two are undervalued and how do you want to weight these two, and a back test provided with that. And they can use that in whatever system they want. It could just be another data point. There's the volatility index for stocks is kind of like a risk gauge. I wish I could show this from young Jamie here. I just wanted to say that. But if the VIX is at 12, it's very hard to tell if it's a time to sell. If VIX is at 120, it's very hard time to buy because it means risk is higher. What our model does, again, it's very easy, it's standardized to understand, well, this one looks more undervalued than that one. And that's it. Like from a risk-adjusted standpoint, very easy to compare the two. So if you're looking for another data point in your committees, you can license it for that purpose. And then again, the ultimate goal would be fully automated, systematic ETF that instead of market cap weighting or equal weighting for a particular sector or, large cap stocks in general, you can have a differentiated strategy that could be optimized. Which stock should I weight towards that more likely have better risk-adjusted returns, and stay away from the ones that are less likely to have. Again, we have misses all the time. Like there certainly have been days, both in the back test and our live trading of Bitcoin, that we sold and the market went up. And there certainly have been days that we were, long in the market and it went down dramatically. But, for example, we sold our Bitcoin at 117. It went to 125, which, that was a couple stressful days. And then went straight back down to 87. Now, we bought at 87. We've been riding this wave down, but we didn't sell at 60. We didn't let fear take us over at 60. It was definitely a worrisome moment. And if I was a financial advisor, I'd probably be panicking a little bit if I recommended that to my client.
It was a crazy fucking week, dude.
Yeah. But you have a system in place that takes away the emotion of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't checked today, but if you had bought at 60,
it's like 70,000.
Yeah, you have it was the worst day of Bitcoin since FTX.
Yeah.
If I remember, that was
a 2 or 3 year low.
Yeah. From that, and then it had the best day in 2 or 3 years, right? Like, fear is the mind breaker. So you have Dune on there, right? I'm misquoting there. And obviously this is not to the aspect of Paul Atreides and all that and the jihad, which we should avoid that topic, I suppose. I've already screwed myself twice here, I guess. But I got a fatwa on me. There's 3. I'll just try that here. But we, taking away that human emotion is, I think, very important. Not just from, again, I'm sure there are people that sold at 117 had all the wrong reasons, or 125 had all the wrong reasons. And it's, again, back to the jiu-jitsu analogy, I might get very lucky and I might tap somebody who's pretty good, and I can walk away and I'm going to call my dad and I tapped a black belt today. I got 2 black belts a few months ago. And you know what happened the next time? They beat the living crap out of me. And the reason for that is because they're black belts. They have a better system in place. They understand what happened before. They learned from it, and they proceeded to beat the ever-loving fuck out of me. I like the sport because of that aspect. But it's just having those systems in place is important. But I guess the bigger goal for us is we want to be the standard of risk and opportunity indices. There's not enough respect for the upside risk in the current risk, market of people similar to what we do. We want to provide something for advisors that not only are we providing you with the ability to understand the downside risk, but also provide the upside risk as well, and be able to use this in a fashion that you can rotate or risk off, or whatever use case that you have. We're going to be able to provide you a system for that.
So what did happen this week?
What didn't happen this week is a better question.
Right. So what did happen? Because last Friday, for those who don't know or don't invest or actively invest, it was a shit day. Depending on where you bought in, right? But overall, a lot of things went down, not just a little, metric fuck ton, right? And to your point, if you can take emotion out of it, you can see opportunity there. If you buy at the right time, if you buy it at the bottom, if you would have bought at the bottom, there's a lot of them that went right back to where they were last Friday. There was a notification I got that my Solana was down like 60%. And then literally the next day it was up 32%. And I was just like, what in the fuck just happened? It was a crazy week. And for someone who just kind of like passively trades, every once in a while I get lucky on an option, like you were mentioning, every once in a while you get lucky, but for the most part, I just put things into, things that are either doing well or they've historically done well, and just trying to make a little bit of extra cash here and there. Right. And on yesterday, Friday, Trump tweeted, "Ready, set, gains." And then the market just went whoosh right back up. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? Because there was a point where Tesla was like 350, 360. And then at the close of business yesterday, it was back up to 420. And I was like, what the hell what just happened?
Let's take a quick break. And then we'll get
You got peeking?
Yeah, I got peeking. Yeah, that's okay.
Let's go. We'll be right back. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. So, Ben, what the fuck? Huh?
Stock market, right?
Yeah, what the fuck happened, dude? Because, I lost 20K, and then I was only down 10K, and then, I haven't made my money back, but I was down a lot, bought a little bit at what I thought was the bottom, and then it just kept going, and I was like, well, there goes that, too. And then, now, as a crypto holder for the last 6 or 7 years, this is pretty normal. It does this every so often. But it was drastically fast. Within what felt like hours. I know it was an all-week thing. But it felt like it was only hours, and I just kept getting a notification, and I should have turned it off. But I just kept it what felt like every 30 minutes. 5%, down 5%, down 5%, down 5%, down 5%, and it just did not stop until it did, and then it went up a lot.
What does Gable say? It's like once you've done wrestling, everything in life is easy. It's like once you've done crypto investing, is there's nothing like it.
It is crazy.
I can give my opinions on the rest of the sphere as well as Bitcoin a little bit later, but okay. So looking short term, the fear that I think markets had that led to the price of gold silver rising significantly was the fear that we would not have an independent Federal Reserve, that we would have a Federal Reserve that was beholden to the demands of the president. And okay, well, why do we care about that? We would be compromised in terms of the interest rates that maybe perhaps the president wants to set. Do we want a faster growing economy? We want to set interest rates low. There's cheaper lending opportunities, and if I can lend you money at 3%, you're more likely to initiate in equity building businesses that will outperform that 3% than if you did at an 8% interest rate, right? You're more likely to buy a house at 3% than at 8% because it's easier to afford those payments. And that means that more houses have more demand and more houses get built and yada, yada. So if we have a Fed chairman or Federal Reserve in general that's beholden to the president, you're running the risk of him forcing lower interest rates, dumping money into the economy, higher inflation, weaker US dollar, yada, yada. And that is why the price of the store value assets rose significantly, gold and silver, to be exact here, because Bitcoin did not rise during this market. And you could talk about that a little bit too. But on Friday, last Friday, when Kevin Warsh was selected, I think a lot of those fears came out of the market that maybe this will be a Fed chairman that's conservative and won't be totally beholden to the president, like maybe, I'm just making this up, the Steve Bissett would have been, the Treasury Secretary of the Treasury. And that relieved a lot of the pressure with gold and silver, and markets fell. That's kind of the short term, looking at it, because we don't have to worry about interest rates falling dramatically, which means higher equity prices, but that might be a hotter economy. And, really, we can argue about the middle class and whatnot being destroyed since the bailout. But I think we should, I think this is, the longer story. I'm going to go backwards and I'm going to go further backwards. Jerome Powell is a Republican. He comes from the private equity world. He's been a Fed governor before, and he was a Trump nominee. So a lot of the thinking here, and he went through the first Trump administration. He went through the Biden administration, which he put on that money printer, to say the least. We dumped trillions of dollars in the economy, and he acted. Maybe I'm not the one who's right to judge here, but in my personal opinion, I think he acted too fast to cut to zero during COVID, and I think he acted too slow to raise rates at the first signs of inflation. Okay, so what do I mean by that? The COVID-19 virus, as scary as it was, and there's a lot of different aspects that have come out over time about, school shuts down and hospitals and whatever, right? And the cutting to the zero, what we call ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, was a dramatic move that was used during the financial crisis, which I'm going to circle back to that in a little bit. That, again, you want to dump money into the economy. One of the best ways to do that is to lower interest rates, let people take out loans at, let the banks, to be specific, take out loans at 0%. They can go loan at 2%, 3%. That's a fair margin for a bank, and really dump money into the economy. And the problem with that is is the era of easy money, the age of easy money, depending on who you ask. And too many people had access to too cheap capital, that bad ideas and bad investments and high inflation came out of it. So when we're
dumping trillions of dollars in the stock into the economy, which I'm not an expert, but I don't think all of that money has even been released yet. There's still plenty of money that's been earmarked away from those deals, like the environmental act, whatever that act was during the Biden administration. They call it environmental. It was just total bullshit. Trillions of dollars. And we ended up having 8%, 10% inflation. And the Fed would consistently send the message out that it's transitory, it's transitory, it's transitory. And obviously it was not transitory. These were not one-time price increases. These were permanent increase in prices that the economy had to face. And that means that your $100,000 is worth $90,000 the year before. And that's not good for cash holding individuals, which are the majority of our economy. I don't think most people are necessarily equity owners in the stock market. Of course, you have some more and more people come that way, but you look at lower middle class people, they're the ones who get hit by inflation the most. So Jerome was too quick, in my opinion, and this is my bias, as we should never have shut down. I am sure that people are going to disagree with me on that. But I don't think we ever should have shut down the economy for COVID-19. What we knew at the time was that the death rate in China was extremely low. It did not kill children that did not have comorbidities. And not to say that children that, it's a terrible time for me to smile, that was for the baby. But children with comorbidities were, dying with COVID. How much of that was dying because of COVID is obviously up for debate. And it was elderly people that were being affected the most. So what should have happened? And I think that most people that, aren't wearing masks in their car by themselves would agree, is that they should have had the elderly people shelter in place until there was enough time passed or they had gotten it in a way that we could manage. But instead, they decided to shut down schools. They decided to send elderly people to nursing homes to give each other COVID, overwhelming the hospital system, and shutting down the economy. Again, part of what the Fed's job is to react to whatever else is happening. So when they probably heard about COVID, they probably thought what everybody else was, and everything is going to hell. So they lowered interest rates to zero for way too long. Now they're printing trillions of dollars, and now we're starting to see rising inflation. And it's obvious to everybody, except for certain people, including Janet Yellen, who I think is a criminal and should go to jail, and I'll explain that in a second, that this was going to lead to a rise of inflation. And they certainly didn't act fast enough to increase interest rates. And now, I think in some people's opinion, including the President of the United States, that interest rates are too high and that it's not allowing him to grow the economy at the speed that he'd want to. Now, he is an equity holder, especially in real estate. Those are very sensitive to, they are not typically volatile assets, but they are, of course, sensitive to interest rates. And he wants rates cut because he wants a faster growing economy during his presidency, for his legacy, and because he is a holder of risk-adjusted assets, it makes sense that he wants to lower interest rates. And because Jerome's not doing what he says, and holding rates, which I think is actually correct. I think that the labor market is not so weak that we need to worry about the rise. We do not have to worry more about a weaker labor market. So the two mandates of the Fed are maximum employment at the exact quote here is at stable prices. So I don't think we're at more risk that we're going to get 10% in unemployment, where we want to cut rates, give more money into the economy, versus a rising inflation. And we are starting to see some prices cut, which is kind of interesting. Which means why would you cut into that? Why would you, if you're declining prices at this here, I think, you have an argument to be made that
you shouldn't cut interest rates at all because the economy is acting fine. But I think the bigger fear would be another resurgence of inflation from, I think, the middle class perspective, which is the perspective I try to take. So he wants to get Jerome, who's, they're also saying that, they spent billions of dollars on the new building. I think that's a bullshit. On the other hand, there's also the Fed governor who is taking out buying secondary homes on primary mortgages. That's illegal. She should be fired, but not because Trump wants to get rid of her, because she broke the law and you and I would go to jail for that. It's mortgage fraud. So that's I think the bigger risk and why the markets fell. But I think I don't think we've really had a truly independent Fed. Maybe from the president, we have a truly independent Fed for a long time. During the 70s and 80s, there was the savings and loans crisis. And it's probably going a little bit too far back. But, you start to see central banking get more involved with bailouts of banks. And these weren't systematic risks. But what it really jumps down to, and can you pull up long-term capital management? I forcing her to type with one hand in the baby. In case anybody thought positively of me, I'm making her hold the baby while typing out the longest long-term capital management. So yeah, this is a really interesting case, and I think it really set the precedent for bailouts by the Federal Reserve. And this wasn't directly by the Federal Reserve, but basically this is a hedge fund that was made up of some of the most intelligent, brilliant people in the world. And this includes, for any finance people listening, the people who founded Black-Scholes, which is how we use option prices today and how that's calculated. Really intelligent people. But what they did not expect is that Russia would default on their debt. That was like a 3 standard deviation, 99.9% unlikelihood. And it collapsed. And there was a fear of systematic risk in the markets. And what happened is the Federal Reserve, while not directly bailing them out, got 14 banks together, excluding Bear Stearns, which is an interesting case, and I'll get back to that in a second, to bail out long-term capital management and hold off on that systemic risk. So, of course, in the moment, that was probably a net benefit in that there wasn't a total collapse of, I'd be a little dramatic when I say total collapse, but a risk on these banks who had derivatives with them or, in the stock market. But what it did do is it set a precedent that if there was to be systematic risk in the markets, that the Federal Reserve would step in one form or another. If we fast forward to 2008, or the next decade, we see an increasingly large amount of risk taken by these banks. Particularly, as I think most people are aware, in the mortgage industry. And the product, the mortgage-backed security, is effectively a combination of mortgages, when packaged together, are more diversified and therefore have lower risk for the investors than buying a single security. Stupid example, but if you lost your job and you had a great job, you had a high credit, whatever, and you lost your job, you're all of a sudden that mortgage company is now riskier on your mortgage. But in this neighborhood, you have 100 people with good jobs and nice income. 1, 2, 3 people lose their jobs, the investors loading to the entire neighborhood are going to be fine. But what happened is that the banks started, it's very profitable, taking on riskier loans such as no income, no job verification loans, and floating interest rate loans that for 5 years you'd have lower interest than that teaser rate. And you didn't really, this is the American dream, right? You come here or you lived here or whatever, and you want to buy a home, right? Like, I don't know anybody who's like, oh, I don't want to buy a home. Like, everybody wants to have a home. And they started taking these riskier loans, packaging them together, and the credit rating agencies would still give their seal of approval saying that, okay, well, you took a bunch of shit, you packaged it together, it's not that bad anymore. Reality, though, it was still a bunch of shit. And when can you pull up the Troubled Asset Relief Program, please? Yes, I'm a terrible person. Yes, there we go. So in response to the ultimate failures of the banks, including Bear Stearns, which I think it's just a funny anecdote in history that they were not bailed out because this is almost in retribution because they did not bail out long-term capital management a decade ago. This program was instituted to provide liquidity to the banks. Since the point of this story is going from long-term capital management to 2008 is that the banks were basically told, at least in my opinion, that the riskier activities you take will not be borne by the owners, but be borne by the taxpayers. And they were able to take on these incredibly risky positions that ultimately collapsed. And to prevent a total systematic failure of the banking system, they bailed out these banks and gave them tons of money in liquidity, which, obviously it covered enough issues that those banks recovered and they were able to pay nice bonuses to everything. But the free market capitalism that we had, I'm not going to pretend it was always perfect, but in a lot of ways it became, from that moment, they bailed out that hedge fund or the Fed organized that bailout. It stopped being pure capitalism where, yes, if you take on more risk, you get more reward, but you are the one who has to pay the bill when it comes due. Now it's, okay, profits for me, but not, but losses for thee. And if we look at the size of the middle class, it's dwindled quite a bit over the last 2 decades since this happened. I think that's really the socialization of losses, because of, again, what I would describe as not a truly independent Fed, not looking at the long-term aspects of holding banks beholden to their risk taking, and which keeps them far more in check than whatever programs that may have in place today. It's kind of lost the Fed being able to act truly independently. It just seems, at least to me, that maybe they're not beholden to the president, but I certainly don't think the Fed has acted in the truest, best fashion for the economy and for the middle class for several decades. That's just, again, my opinion, but that's, going back to what happened last week, I think the smaller issue at hand was we got a Fed chairman that is probably not totally beholden to Trump. He seems like a relatively intelligent person. He wasn't like a Trump lackey. We'll see what he does. And that's why gold and silver dropped. I'm not going to comment on the recovery since then in some of those aspects. But I think that's kind of the larger issue at hand. I just don't think we have a Fed that's allowing for pure capitalism. I think it's allowing for crony capitalism in a lot of ways.
And do you think that's going to change now, or is it going to continue?
No.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's more, in some ways it's a political issue, but I think it's better than if Trump had selected his guy or girl. I'm just happy it's not Janet Yellen. So before I go into what I think is going to happen, Janet Yellen should be in jail, and she's probably if this country falls, she's probably more solely responsible than any other person in the entire world. During COVID, when they had this zero interest rate policy, did you buy your house then? When did you buy it?
I rent this.
Oh, you rent this? Okay.
Yeah.
So I bought my house at 2.75% interest. I paid at the top of the housing market. I needed a house for a kid, but I happened to be buying at a time high prices, low interest rates. Everybody who had a mortgage at 5-6% refinanced.
Yeah, of course.
Makes sense. Pay a little bit of fees, and you're paying over the course of the loan far less.
Yeah.
Except for Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen decided, you know what? I'm just going to sit on my hands, and I'm going to continue allowing the Treasury to pay 5 to 6% interest rates instead of refinancing at 2% maybe. And oh God, I'm so sorry. Can you pull up a percentage of GDP versus interest expense? You'll see what I mean in a second. Is there like a chart that we can get into? Okay, so this chart here, I mean, of course, you see in like the 80s, 90s, it's starting to grow. We get it under control under Clinton. It's pretty flat through the financial crisis. And then it spikes dramatically. And what happens here is that we have that debt we were having before, 5 or 6%, or whatever it is, and we're taking out more debt, with the amount of money we're dumping in the economy. And everybody, again, at 2020 was refinancing at whatever rate they can get. The federal government, at what we call risk-free rate in finance, is probably able to, if they wanted to, borrow at 2% from, it's the world's reserve currency, right? We should talk about that. But Janet Yellen sits on her hands, and the debt that we could have refinanced as a percentage of, back from 5 or 6 to 2 or 3, is still at 5 or 6%. So we're borrowing more money, and we didn't refinance, and
So is this the national debt? Is that what we're talking about?
This is the treasury holdings, like your treasury bills that you're getting from the treasury. Like people are buying, other countries are buying our treasuries, getting a small amount of interest because it's the world's reserve currency. They're getting, they really should be, again, like they should be getting paid to lend us money at maybe 1.5%, 2% if we had refinanced at the bottom of the interest rate, zero interest rate policy. I said Janet Yellen just sat on her hands, and we're still paying those countries 5 or 6%. So when interest rates rose from 2008 zero to, I'm just making this up a little bit, 5%, and we're paying these countries 5%, when we cut interest rates to zero, we could have refinanced at that point with that 5% to zero, depending on the length of the bond. And instead, Janet just sat there, did nothing, and everybody else refinanced their mortgage, refinanced their car loan, refinanced their student debt, except for Janet Yellen, the most powerful person in the Treasury, decided, you know what, I'm just going to let this rate, I'm not going to refinance. I'm just going to.
Why? Why do you think someone would do that?
I think she's purely incompetent. She was a bad fair chairman. She followed Bernanke, who was in charge of the 2008 financial crisis, which, as I just spoke about, I don't think the long-term health of the nation's economy was benefited by him going to zero interest, doing things like TARP, dumping money in the economy. It wasn't the best thing for that. And she was just more of the same in a lot of ways. And we did not get, if you look at the GDP over the course of the Obama administration, we're looking at like 1.5%, 2% every year, which is not.
What's the average?
We should be targeting probably 2 to 3%. Under Trump, it's been 4% in some years. That's not always good necessarily. It might mean higher inflation, but it's 2% after the financial crisis was the worst economic recovery in the history of the nation. If you look back at the Great Depression, look at like the 70s inflation crisis, like all these other times, we had a much sharper recovery. It took 8 years of Obama, did nothing, and Janet Yellen was a very big part of that. And in terms of why she didn't refinance, I would speculate that she probably didn't have it just blows my mind why she wouldn't do it. I just feel like it was obvious to everybody.
Is there a tinfoil hat explanation?
Yes, I won't make it. You can make it.
I don't know.
I mean, you can look at how much money the Chinese are probably paying her, but I really hope people don't see this. But
I won't tell it, but I will tell it.
Yeah,
fuck it.
But in all seriousness, though, I just don't think she was. I just don't think she's ever been very good in these positions, and I wish I had a better reason to tell you why she wouldn't do it. I think if you ask most people in finance, it kind of blows their mind.
Interesting.
Not really when we consider it's going to fuck us for generations.
Dude, it's fascinating how, it's just fascinating how some of these people get to the position that they get to for one reason or another. Like I said, I'm sure there's a tinfoil explanation that's probably pretty spot on, given everything that's came out in the last week or so, where conspiracy theorists are like 1,000-0 as of recent. But it's yeah, dude. I mean, it's crazy because the last time we looked it up, they were printing $53 trillion a week. That is unfathomable.
Well, if I may, I think it might be unfathomable to the point that it's just not either correct or truly providing context.
I mean, that's... I don't know.
The entire United States GDP is what?
They were printing something insane. It was insane.
3.5 billion.
Yeah, but what's the GDP of the United States in 2025?
Probably like 17, 18.
I'm the worst person.
Oh god. I swear I can type that.
Well, that was...
yeah, so I mean, it's all in context, right?
Of the U.S.
Yeah, so it's all in context. So it's 117.2 trillion.
No, that's the world.
That's the world?
Yeah, if we were 117 trillion...
Oh, you're right.
There we go.
30.6 trillion. So 3.5 billion times 52 is $150 billion a week. I mean, it obviously it adds up. Our military spending is absurd. The general term I'm looking for, Social Security benefits, is a large problem. But the fact that interest expense is a major national issue is because of Janet Yellen.
That's interesting. I never knew that. Yeah, because I think we looked up the interest rate on the debt one time, and it's like a couple trillion a year. Well, it was like $1.5 trillion a year, and to even just make a dent in the debt is what feels like impossible.
Now, this is an important aspect of this whole thing. Is there is a weaker overall, if you look at the US dollar. She cheats the kid.
Got to make her earn that paycheck, bro.
Don't get paid.
She keeps saying that, but
she can't say
I don't know why she keeps saying that.
Yeah, it's just
jeez.
You can't say that on the podcast.
Yeah, dude.
You get paid in love. That's what I tell
Talk about the USD value over the years.
Yeah, look up Euro to USD, or actually look up US dollar index.
The logo does get grainy, huh? The whole TV's just fucking grainy right now.
It's all good. Okay, so we can see here in the more local, recent times, the fall from U.S. dollar index being above almost 115. Mm-hmm. You could go to Europe and have a great time, and it would be like nothing, right? Now we are back down towards 97, which, again, historical context, you can look here, is not a bad level to be at. Can you look up now USD versus the euro? Now I'm just having fun with it.
I think it's like 1 to 1.3.
It's like what we said earlier. It's like you can't apologize when you're wrong. You have to dig
into it.
This one is I just accept the fact that I'm being mean here. Just type these things in. No, that's it. Go back, please. You can just go back to the first Google page. Let's click on can you make that chart any bigger? Yeah, click on that.
You just hit the 1 year at the bottom there. Or 5 year. Do 5 years.
So, we're kind of cycled back to 2021 levels, 2020, I guess that would be. And the problem that I have with this is we're dealing with a tariff environment that makes the trade wars have not been beneficial for the U.S. dollar. Now, one could argue about the more socioeconomic effects of that. I don't think importing jobs are necessarily going to happen. We have seen investment in some of the more sophisticated software companies like NVIDIA building their chips and Intel and all that here. And that's great from not just an economic perspective, but from a military perspective, defense perspective. But when I see this, and this is part of the story of why gold and silver are up over the last few years, I don't get it. I don't see how, and this is me as a true-blooded, blue-blooded American here, despite my, what anybody might say about my Zionist beliefs. How is Europe and Asia and that godforsaken country, Canada, in any bit of a more beneficial position than we are? The argument, I guess, would be Canada is now in line to trade more with China. These other countries are going to band together. Countries are going to start using other currencies than the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, yada, yada, to which I call bullshit. We still have the strongest economy. We still have the strongest military, despite all the problems that we may or may not have with our percentage of GDP. Our debt to GDP versus other countries, if we could pull that up. I'm so sorry.
I don't think you are.
Just the baby's so cute, that's why.
I'm going to make you hold her at this point.
That's fine. I can. The debt to GDP of the United States is, while high.
What am I Googling?
Debt to GDP by nation. By country is fine. Let's go. Yeah, let's go there. That first one. Let's do. Can we do last? Can we sort by that? All right. Let's ignore some of these other countries, but let's focus on Japan, which has been one of the strongest stock markets. And I don't know if trading economics is correct in these facts, but let's talk about it generally. Japan, again, has been one of the stronger stock markets in the last year. Extremely high GDP, debt to GDP. The United States, I think this number is probably a little high, but if we go down a little bit more. France, Canada, a lot of these Euro countries, they're still facing similar, United Kingdom, facing relatively, I don't know how correct some of these numbers are. I think the United Kingdom is a little bit low.
Do you want the number higher or lower?
You want the number to be lower. You want debt to be below the GDP. So when you see some of these other countries with that 80% doesn't sound right at all. Point being is the debt to GDP of the United States is relatively in line with some of these much slower growing economies that produce nothing. Meanwhile, the US dollar is getting crushed in favor of these other economies. Which I would say, again, like, I don't think the US dollar is going anywhere. I think it will still be the reserve currency. I think this BRICS is going to not work out at the end of the day. You know, there's nowhere else to go except for potentially, I suppose, people think gold or silver as a basis of currency, in which I, again, cast my doubt. I think that the United States economy is too strong, we're too innovative, we're too powerful of a nation to fall apart. Now, of course, you know, look at history, I'm sure Rome thought the same thing. I think we have a much more sophisticated, dynamic economy than, you know, hey, we built some roads and plumbing. Not to say that all the Romans did, but we are able to produce things at a much better and faster rate than any of these other nations. Our economy is more stable than some of our biggest competitors like China. I think China is in a very precarious position in a lot of ways, which I guess is finally time we talk about the Middle East, because that's always a fun topic, right? So China has, I can't quote the amount of oil supply they have, but they get a lot of their oil from us, but they also get a lot of their oil from Russia, they get a lot of their oil from Iran, and they get a lot of their oil from Venezuela. Russia has been in the midst of a war with Ukraine for 5 years now, something like that. A war that's gone nowhere. It's a resource suck. Russia cannot move within Ukraine, and they continue to throw resources at it, and that seems to be the national.
It's just how they deal with things.
Which, you know, like that, I don't agree with taking over a sovereign nation. I'm not going to go into Ukraine being one of the most corrupt nations in the world, if not the most corrupt. But let's not throw rocks at cripples here. But a lot of their. I mean, okay, let's say that they're not using all their oil to support their military and they're able to supply China. They need money to fuel their economy. They're probably selling to China at relatively low rates. That would be my guess. Or they may not be able to supply all the oil to China that they want to, and whatever that case is. Either way, if this war in Ukraine does wrap up at some point during this administration, I don't know if that's necessarily going to result in China getting their oil from Russia any cheaper or any better. I mean, the Europeans cut off the pipelines from Russia for oil. If that continues, that's more demand for the Russian oil. If that raises prices, China doesn't necessarily get that oil anymore for as cheap as they're getting. Iran, I don't want to call it an administration. I think it's giving it too much credence if I call it that. They likely, I would suspect, are on their way out. The Ayatollah is on his way out. And I think what's happening there is absolutely horrific, that they're shooting protesters hand over fist. They are cutting their necks, taking them to the hospital just to slice their throats. I can go on. But another source of cheap Iranian oil for China seems to be going by the wayside. Venezuela doesn't supply the largest amount of oil. The oil there is, I'm not an oil expert, it's not of the quality that we can produce here. That means it's lower outputs, it's harder to drill. But the fact that we were able to remove Maduro, and we don't have, I wouldn't claim to have full control, but we certainly have a large amount of influence over Venezuela than we did 3 months ago. It's pretty badass to take them out like that, but we'll get into that. So point being here is we have these three sources of oil that China has really taken advantage of. And one of the strongest signals for an economy is, how cheap or expensive is oil and gas, and being able to move things and ship things. And of course, one could argue, if we're working from home more, maybe gas isn't as important. But generally, historically, it's been a pretty good signal of how fast an economy can grow. In China, again, I don't know the exact percentage of how much they could produce on their own, but naturally, if you increase the price of an input into the economy, it's going to put more risk on the economy as a whole. Certainly, China, over the course of the last few decades, has experienced incredible growth, but how much of that is a house of cards? It's if you're leveraged to the tits and one thing goes wrong, you could lose everything. And I'm not saying it's going to happen to China, but I do think that this has shifted the power of the yen that maybe was growing because of these tariffs and friendly relations. The Chinese yen.
It's Japanese. That's
Chinese yen too, right?
Is it Chinese yen? Are they both called the yen?
I think so, right?
I don't know.
Whatever.
All right, fair enough.
The Chinese currency to the U.S. currency.
It's
been like 3 hours we've been talking, so maybe I'm confusing this. But for the Chinese currency to the U.S. currency, like as much as those trade wars might be pushing people to work with China, I think at the end of the day, we export, if we include software, way more than China does. And we produce better products, and we are a friendlier ally, besides for these trade blips, which I think are really going to come down to getting other deals done. Like, for example, with Mexico, reducing the level of migration to this country, illegal immigration, and fentanyl, which we've seen fentanyl drops consistently across, every data point points to consistent drop in fentanyl, which maybe that's the greater goal with Mexico, but generally I think a lot of these trade deals are to isolate China. And then you throw in the fact that they have that higher input. I think we're likely going to come out ahead, and the US dollar is going to recover from these lows compared to every other nation. I really don't think that the low US dollar is here to stay. Which also, going back to the gold and silver, I'm not saying I'm not going to give financial advice again, but a lot of these fears has been because of the weakness in the US dollar, and I don't know how much of that continues.
Well, I hope you're right.
It's not all a bad thing, though. It means that our exports are cheaper to get to other countries. They're more likely to come here and vacation here and spend their money here than for us to go there. Like, it's not a weak US. There is a fallacy that a weak US dollar is just bad for everybody. Like, you don't want a totally weak US dollar. You don't want like a Zimbabwe, but it's not the worst thing in the world for a lot of these companies.
Yeah, and looking at the chart, it's really not that. It's not as low as it could be. Honestly, it's still at a good spot, right? It's not 115 that it was, but sitting at 96, 97, it's still solid. It's still right there. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen.
So you're on.
Yeah.
You're on. Okay, so now we're gonna let's. This is one of the topics that I think we want to talk about. Was I don't know how many Jews you've had on your podcast.
You'd be the first.
Okay, well, I hope I'm not the first Jew you met, but
no.
I don't want to give the perspective that we're all like this, all this annoying.
Not the first Jew I've met.
Okay, but I consider myself to be a Zionist. And what I mean by that is I do believe that the Jewish people deserve a homeland. And I believe that Israel is the land of our ancestors, and that we should have our sovereign nation and be able to defend ourselves against enemies within and beyond. That's my definition of Zionism. I'm sure that there are people out there that think that Zionism means we should control the entire Middle East. Maybe, I don't know if that Jews believe that. I think other people might think that's what, or that we control the world or something like that. But I think it's important that the context of how Israel came to be and where we are today in Iran's part in all of this, is important to take place. And I think I'm going to talk from an economic perspective and a societal perspective as much as I can here. The Holocaust, which I think most people are aware, it's sad that people aren't as aware as they were, was the murder of 15 million people, of which 6 million were Jews. That's about 2/3 of the population in Europe. It was only until recently that the Jewish population of the world recovered from pre-Holocaust heights. And following that, a lot of the Jews that did survive in concentration camps, or they fled to other parts that were more safe in Europe or Africa, or to Israel, or sorry, Palestine at the time, were displaced and obviously devastated. And my great aunt was, there's this Daniel Craig movie, Defiance, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. She was part of that group. I have a gold coin that she carried with her. My uncle had one too, and he had melted down to his engagement ring. And I want to do the same, but unfortunately, we don't live in an old school economy where I can just bring it to a smelter. But anyway, I have this coin. But anyway, so all the Jews, very displaced. So in 1948, there was an agreement that they would split what we know as, one Jerusalem and part of Israel today, between the Jewish people. Some of them were living there, some of them migrated, and the people living there today, and basically established two separate nations. And then they decided it was a great idea because, to be fair, I think everybody was tired from World War II. Obviously, one of the greatest, I think it was probably the greatest loss of life in any war. And they did just, figure this out yourself. So in 1948, if I remember my years correctly here, the War of Independence, Israel wins, establishes a sovereign nation. And since then, there's kind of been, this back and forth between Israel and these other nations. Israel, there's a war that happens, and I, being biased, I recognize how ridiculous it sounds that other nations, unprovocated, attack Israel. They don't believe in Israel's existence. There's probably a little bit of a deeper aspect to that I maybe want to explore, but basically the history has been attack Israel, Israel wins the war. You have to, right? Like, you have to win. You have no choice. Otherwise, you're gone. Israel takes land. They make a peace treaty with the nation. They give back land. And there's all this back and forth. And two of the constant issues in many ways in the Middle East has been Iran as a constant provocateur through proxy armies, and the Gaza Strip in Palestine in general. And the Gaza, and I don't know the exact treaty or war, that area actually used to be Egyptian. And at some point in one of those treaties that I mentioned, high level, it became Israel's responsibility to care for these people. And that's because the Egyptians didn't want to deal with it. Why not? I assume that just, very large, concentrated population that the Egyptians didn't feel like they wanted the liability taken care of. And since the embassy was taken in the 70s under Carter, who, side note, worst president ever probably, they have been fighting proxy wars in the Middle East through Hezbollah in Lebanon, through other nations, Syria, whatever, and currently Hamas in Gaza. And on October 7th, 2020, God, I should know this year, that's embarrassing. If we take a look at that time frame before that, Israel had been, under Trump, making peace deals with other nations that were unbelievable to many of us to ever happen. The fact that there was normalized relations with the United Arab Emirates, with Egypt, Syria. I don't think Trump gets enough credit for that. I think that was one of the most monumental movements of peace ever. And one of the things that all of this is against the working against Iran. None of this is to Iran's benefit, of course. That Israel has normal relations. Iran's goal is the destruction of Israel, or dictatorship. More countries have normalized relations with Israel, and that wasn't good for them. And through their proxies of Hamas, let's go back one more second. Israel was very close to normalizing relations with the Saudis, who they hate Iran and Iran hates them. The Shiites and the Sunnis, I can't remember which one on either side, but they hate each other. They hate each other more than they hate the Jews, which is saying something. So October 7th, 2023, I think it was, if I remember correctly, occurs. And just to give context of the situation, it would have been equivalent to, based on the size of the population of Israel compared to the United States, the equivalent of 40,000 people dying in 9/11, which I'm not, of course, diminishing what happened on 9/11. The United States started 2 wars following that, and we have a very different nation that we had. Millions of people killed. And of course, there's criticism. I mean, I've mentioned the Iraq War was a mistake, but I don't think people are accusing the United States of war crimes and genocides and whatnot, like they are with Israel. So again, in the context of how bad that attack was, just in the death rates, not to mention the mutilation of bodies, the raping of women and children, the kidnapping. Particularly what bothers me is the kidnapping of Americans, and the fact that, same thing when the embassy was taken by Iran, that we didn't go full-flown war hawk here and do our part to get them back ASAP. It makes no sense to me that a country is expected to hold back after something like that happens when they're not only attacked, but also their citizens are kidnapped and undergo horribly cruel conditions, and then get accused of not having restraint and of genocide, which we can talk about in a second. It makes very little sense to me, but from Iran's perspective, it was perfect because it didn't cost them much. It was a embarrassing security failure by Israel. Let's call it what it is. I mean, not absolute failure by Netanyahu. There's no doubt about it. And it soured relations from a publicity standpoint to the point that the deal with Saudi Arabia, that was pretty close to happening, according to most, was put on hold. And some other relationships were ruined. And there's also other coordinated attacks by Hezbollah and things like that. But I want to concentrate on this issue a little bit more. And it's, from a publicity standpoint, it worked out great because they are now sympathetic to, a lot of people these college students who don't know anything are very sympathetic towards Hamas.
Well, are they sympathetic towards Hamas, or are they sympathetic to the people who live there?
I'm sympathetic towards the people who live there. I think if you're an average person living in Gaza, or you were living in Tokyo when the United States firebombed Tokyo and there's 100,000 people died and more people died in the firebombing of Tokyo than both nuclear bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So nobody talks about that because, the nuclear bomb. Your bombing of Dresden by England and Germany.
I didn't know that.
I think, I don't know how many people, tens of thousands of people died when England bombed Dresden. And we don't talk about that because that's the right side of history. But those were all wrong. Bombing a civilian population indiscriminately, I would say. Of course, there are plenty of people in Palestine. They're normal people. There's probably good people, right? They're like everybody else. They want to live their lives. They want their children to live healthy lives. And of course, I will say there are people that post videos. There's this one video of this woman so happy that her children died on the day of the attack because they're going to be martyrs. And I think that's a very exaggerated thing, but there were certainly people celebrating the attack. But Hamas has tried to, they still had until recently, either the people they kidnapped or their bodies. And this couldn't be just something that Israel rolls over and just takes it. Again, the context of the situation of 9/11. And if you looked at how many people died in this war, I think the most recent numbers, according to the Palestinian Health Authority, which is, in my opinion, not a trustworthy source, but let's say it's 70,000. If we can agree on that context. In a population of that size, that's actually a pretty low rate in terms of death rate of a country at war historically. Again, there are populations within World War I and World War II that were just absolutely devastated and never recovered. Israel is one of the few, I don't know if there is another one, that will really do a good job of warning about an attack. And the issue that happens here, though, is Hamas has spent the money that they are given. Instead of building roads and plumbing, they use it for rockets and tunnels. And they use hospitals and schools as locations to hold captives and to, bomb themselves in. And of course, it's a war crime to bomb a hospital. But what is the solution if an enemy combatant is using a hospital, which is also a war crime, it's against the Geneva Convention, to hide in a school or a hospital instead of into a different location or whatever that might be. So, of course, every loss of life is tragic, but again, let's break down according to the Palestinian Health Authority. I think it's about 31,000 women and children have died, which again, compared to historical ratios of how many people died, again, I can't make this any more clear. It's horrible, but it's a relatively normalized number compared to the overall population deaths and the percentage of population deaths compared to the overall population. Again, they're all being displaced and things like that, but the point I'm really getting to here is the term genocide. As somebody who's got it, passed away, of course, Holocaust survivors, and know people who've lost entire families in the Holocaust, and there's other genocides happening around the world that don't get mentioned. Again, going back to Iran, I think there's 15,000 people in this last week or month, I might be misremembering the number, that were shot by the Iranian government, and nobody makes a sound. And again, I am very sympathetic to anybody who's living there, but the destruction of Hamas, the enemy that has not only been a thorn at their side, but killed thousands and thousands of people in the most horrific way on that day, and again, until recently held captives, including American captives. Anything short of destruction is a failure. And I'm sure one of your questions that you might be pondering right now might be, well, when's enough?
That's one.
That's fair. The other one might be get out of my house, or can you get out of my house?
No, I think I think there's a lot that has to be understood and broken down.
But when have you ever read the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene? Mm-mm. So, basically, and I'm sure The Art of War has some quote about this too. You don't let the enemy off the hook. You destroy them entirely. If you looked at the history of China, Mao Zedong was on the verge of being destroyed. And instead of the Chinese army at the time focusing on the destruction of the communist army, they decided to focus on their efforts on the Japanese. Which, okay, well, this is a weakened army. We've pretty much taken care of them. Why not? And of course, as we know today, Mao Zedong destroys the Chinese army, takes over the country, and is communist China remains till today. That's a very important lesson in history. And I think I'm hopeful on the accords that Trump is trying to get done here. But if I'm not saying, this war can continue forever, but anything short of the unconditional surrender is a failure on everybody's part to allow this organization to continue.
It gets tricky and gets murky because...
Of course it does. This is not a black and white world.
Especially since we funded that. The U.S. paid for that. The U.S.
What context?
The U.S. gave Iran $10 billion, which then Iran used some of that money to then fund Hamas and that attack. And so it gets real tricky because the Middle East has always been a revolving door. So I don't believe that this is where it stops. And that's why I think a lot of people feel the way that they do about it, because this doesn't stop at that. We put this Iranian regime in place as well. Iran was a place where people went, beautiful place. You look at the women in the 70s, all uncovered, normal clothes.
Beautiful.
And we put this regime in place. The U.S., with the help of Israel, Mossad, we put the regime in place because we like this revolving door. It is very profitable. It's very profitable. We have done this with Iraq. We did it with Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, all these places in there that we have fucked with, decentralized. And this is the counter perspective to it, right? This is the counter argument that the CIA has done some fucked up shit in a lot of different places. And I don't know that the benefit has always been in the U.S.'s favor. It seems like the benefit is definitely in Israel's favor, but I don't know that benefit's largely been in the U.S. favor. And it gets, like I said, it gets murky because that money came from us. We funded that attack indirectly, obviously, probably not on purpose. But, we talk about this regime and we get mad about this regime and how they shouldn't be there, but we did that. That was us. Why did we do that? Well, you put on your tinfoil hat. They love that revolving door. It's made us a lot of money, made people a lot of money, at least. Dick Cheney. This.
So happy he's dead.
He made.
I can say that unequivocally.
He made a shit ton of money, and there's been a lot of defense contractors who make a lot of money. There's a lot of people who profit off of this, and I don't believe that it stops here. I don't believe that we destroy Hamas and a new Hamas doesn't pop up. I don't believe that that's the case. I don't think that we don't have very good track records with regime changes, obviously. Again, we put this Iranian regime in place and we were hoping that it would play more ball with us. It didn't, and now here we are.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I think your perspective, I'm not saying that I'm right or you're right. I think it is a bit cynical going back to the fall of the Shah of Iran. It was a U.S. ally to, I think it's not the same equivalence of what happened there, which is a real CIA failure in a lot of ways that was enabled to happen, and a failure by Carter to not act, to get the embassy restored and to deal with the issue, because they empowered the regime to feel like they had authority. And again, that's been a problem ever since. And again, you have China and Russia supporting Iran. The money that was given by Biden, the billions of dollars, was the most utter crock of shit I've ever heard in my life.
But we do this all the time. We still fund Afghanistan to this day. We still give them money. We have for a very long time. We created ISIS. We've funded them. We've given them these tools. So why does this continue to happen, right?
I think, though, I mean, just honing back into Israel here, I think I know that they are a very important ally against our mortal enemy of China. I don't know that China's that big of an issue.
There's a very good chance that China is lying heavily about their population. Have you seen this? There's a very good chance that they are overinflating that number by potentially 1 billion people.
Regardless of the population or not, the house of cards of the economy, I think either way, I think Israel is a very important ally. Now we can get into, I don't think it's the best conversation in the world about whether or not we should be, as Americans, if we're from a libertarian standpoint, giving them money. That's a whole other argument. But if we accept the fact that Israel is our ally, the other part that is perturbing about this is there was peace in the Middle East to some degree that we had not seen in, I don't know, ever, during the prior Trump administration. Again, the peace accords with UAE, relations with Egypt, a nation that Israel has fought for, one could argue leaving the bondage of slavery, thousands and thousands of years ago. That if we include that one, we've been going way back with them. And this really upended the Middle East, that at the end of the day, from our perspective, I truly believe that Israel, despite the fact that I think it's a sovereign nation, deserves the right to exist as Americans, is an ally. Again, we can argue about whether or not we should give money to allies, but it's an ally in the Middle East against a country like Iran that's the number one supporter of terrorism, that funds proxy wars across the Middle East, supplies China with cheap oil. I truly think that's the existence of Israel has been a benefit for America. Again, maybe I'm biased in that opinion.
Yeah,
but the other aspect here that I think is important, and when we talked about like the accusations of genocide a moment ago, but when I see these college students, it's not that they are all like this, but there is certainly a lot that support the jihad. You can see them protesting. And you can make the accusations that the CIA are the ones planting these people to do these kinds of protests, but the support for...
I don't know if that's an accusation. I think we can definitely say that people are paid to protest.
Well, yes,
various things.
True, I don't know if we support the jihad. It's to make sure the context. The protesters saying we support the jihad.
So I think they're I think they're a little mistaken. I think they're a little lost. I think what they're angry about, and I think what a lot of people are angry about, and you mentioned it, the funding is crazy. The funding is nuts. Israel gets $5 billion from the U.S. every year, just flat out. We sent another $6 billion last week. We have sent a very insane amount of money. There's very good evidence that we subsidize a lot of that entire country. For what reason? George Washington warned us very heavily of this exact kind of thing. Foreign alliances, long-term alliances. I'm all for coming together when we need to. And we can make an argument of whether right now is a time to come together because we need to, but this has been a constant drip. This has not been like, oh, we just started supplying this money yesterday. No, we've been supplying this money since the 50s. AIPAC was created in like 1950 something. And it largely influences both political parties, as AIPAC let us know yesterday on Twitter, as AOC tried to claim that it was a right-wing organization, and AIPAC very, very swiftly did not skip a beat to let us know that they support both parties very heavily. And so there is no doubt that there is a lot of incentive for us to continue to send money that way, even though it's probably not in the best interest of the actual American people living here, whether or not that money is needed or necessary or, doing good. That's a different conversation, but the U.S. itself needs to stop funding. We need to get foreign money out the fuck of our politics and out of our out of the government, out of positions of power, lobbying, all of it. This is potentially why JFK was killed. That he wanted to get rid of AIPAC and wanted to replace it with FARA. I think, there's just a shit ton of money, and it's a lot to break down. I don't think it's super simple.
No.
But we are way too intertwined with Israel. That's just the bottom line. We're way too intertwined with the EU. I'm glad that we left the WHO. I think we should leave NATO. I think we should, we're not in the EU.
I don't
NATO.
Yeah.
We should get the fuck out of all of it. And George Washington told us this blatantly. This is not how the country was set up to be ran. There is, people say the United States of Israel. It feels that way. It feels that way. And I think you have to understand that perspective.
I do.
There's a lot with the Files. There's a lot with the Rothschilds and how much of the banks they own and how much positions. And again, if they've grown that, they're this generational family, they've put themselves in these positions, okay. But there's a lot of people that have a lot of questions about a lot of that stuff. And I think they're largely warranted. Back to talking about people protesting and in support of the jihad, I think they're lost. I don't think they know what the fuck they're doing.
They're the same people protesting.
It's just like, it's like when you saw LGBTQ for
Palestine.
And it's like, dude, they'll stone you, right? And so a lot of those, it's ideologically based, right? But I think what Americans are frustrated by is that our money's constantly going there. If you look at the country of Israel, they get a lot of perks that Americans don't have, and we subsidize a lot of that shit. And so I think people are upset about that, and I think more and more is coming out. You have very powerful Jewish people constantly talking about censorship. They're trying to buy X now. There's a good push for censoring things. They bought TikTok. The word Epstein became banned. That is a real thing. I tried. It really is banned. That's not okay.
I agree.
and I think that's where a lot of this frustration comes in. Obviously the videos of what's happening in Gaza is really awful. The place is fucking rubble. It's like, all right, what are we still doing? I can maybe put myself in your shoes and understand what you're saying about Israel. But again, from our perspective as Americans, we are funding that. And that is frustrating just because I don't think we should fund anyone's war, anything. If you want to fight a war, that's on y'all. And I could get, we can talk about relations with China. We can talk about foreign policy, But I'm just going to always go back to how the Constitution was set up, how this was put in place. George Washington said explicitly to never get into long-term alliances. And we are seeing the repercussions of that, where this censorship, this anti-free speech movement, Larry Ellison owning 13, 14 fucking media stations, all these different things. And I think that's where the frustration is bubbling up in a lot of different fashions. And maybe a lot of people don't know how to articulate it, or maybe people don't even understand why they're frustrated. But I think that's a lot of people's frustrations, right? Whether or not, those are, it just goes back to the Middle East has been a revolving door for a while. Are there extreme Muslims that have done awful things? Absolutely. There's extremists in all religions, all facets.
If I may here, it just, putting my American hat on, I find it very hard to justify giving money to any foreign nation. I agree with you. I think that if we're going to do it, it needs to be strategic. Now, one can argue about how much of an investment, a return on investment we've gotten from giving money to Israel. I would argue strategically we've gotten quite a bit, probably not as much as...
How so?
They are our ally in, as you said, the revolving door that is the Middle East, and able to act as our proxy against nations acting in that area. I think that...
But what direct benefit are we getting? What do we get from that? Because realistically, what is the threat of those countries to us as just America? We can talk about Europe, we can talk about Israel, we can talk about whether or not we should protect those places. But strictly for us individually here.
I mean, look, it's hard to argue about direct impacts that Iran, outside of the embassy taken, has had in the United States. But they are an ally to China, which is obviously having tremendous influence on us. And they are the number one supporter of terrorism in the world. And
with our money. And that's where it gets...
Again, this is not a black and white issue,
what I mean?
But I would argue that the money invested in Israel, particularly with how effective they have been through their intelligence, has been a benefit. We not see it every day, a benefit overall to this country. Now, again, I don't see an argument to say that, and just making this up, if Israel has, X amount of Social Security, or actually, I'm not even going to go there. The money going from us to Israel that's now going into the lobbyist pockets is not something that makes sense. It's very circular, and it makes no sense for us to be sending money to Israel, and then Israel sends it to the lobbyists, who then send more to Israel. That's not good. I am not defending that whatsoever. I will say, though, that, again, I think Israel is a very large ally to the United States in the region, which helps us support.
I still want to know what we get back, though. Realistically, because this is an argument that I've never heard anybody be able to answer the question. What does the United States get back for this?
A high level of intelligence in the region and beyond.
And what, do we not get that on our own?
I think that
we have 180 U.S. bases across the world.
Sure. I think that the intelligence, think about what Israel is, right? They're not a very large nation with a lot of people. this is the only way that a country can survive, is by being the best on being not bigger and faster, but by being more intelligent and knowing more. And they clearly do it the best in the world. I don't think anybody would argue with that. And I'm not going to claim that I can point to a single instance that was prevented because the Israelis told them something, or told them not to do something, whatever. But there's a large benefit to having that level of intelligence on the ground in that area that, as you said, has been a revolving door full of countries that have not been friendly to the United States.
But on purpose, though. The United States have set up that. The United States has set up that revolving door.
If we can, I guess that I suppose, in a lot of ways, counteracts any argument that I could possibly make, right? Like, it's like, if we are truly the ones who put the Iranian regime in today, which
we did.
I don't necessarily buy. But generally, I think if we just accept that a lot of these nations are not friendly to us, whether it's today or 40 years ago, or whatever it was, Israel is to support. And again, I'm not claiming that every dollar that goes there is a good use of funds. It's definitely way too much. But I think it's not just a zero return on investment like some would claim.
We just have, we don't feel it. Again, we're middle class citizens. Yeah. We need to feel it.
That's totally fair. But the other thing I would say, though, is I think under the Trump administration, and I'm not going to condone everything that Trump did in 2016, 2020. I certainly disagree with him on a ton of issues. That doesn't need to be the truth anymore with the revolving door. Again, as I said earlier, the peace deals that were accomplished by Jared Kushner specifically, was a very big influence on this in the Middle East. You cannot. It's like dogs and cats getting along. It's just unheard of. The ideas that the peace accords that they managed to produce during that first administration were possible. And the idea of a Saudi-Israel relationship, again, is that for the best benefit of the United States? Let's not get into that. But the idea of there being a peace in the Middle East, in my opinion, was possible. And it might still very well be possible. And as an Americans, the reason we should root for that is because maybe we don't have to supply as much money to that region. Maybe we don't have to keep our soldiers on the ground there. It's maybe it's a little bit more of a hopeful
Sounds
idea.
Real hopeful.
Real hopeful. But, if we don't have, if we do have a regime change in Iran and we can bring back democracy to some degree, I think that word's thrown out too much, but if we can bring back a non-dictatorship that is hell-bent on the destruction of Israel as effectively their sole purpose, and you can manage that area. I mean, of course, it's never going to be perfect, but you can produce a long-standing peace in the area. Maybe the resource suck that has been used, whatever money, we have not gotten a good return on in Israel, the billions of dollars we spent in trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, Iraq, dealing with Iran through proxies and CIA, whatever. I think that's the Americans' best chance of getting a solution that costs us less money, better return on investment, and national security. That's my, again, personal opinion. I'm very hopeful. We'll see what happens. But if we can finalize this deal, it's a lot of hurdles. It involves Hamas laying down their arms completely and surrendering and leaving. People don't usually do that. But if there's peace there and the relations between these other nations can thrive, that is a far better solution for that region and for Americans than what I think we've experienced in our lifetimes, which is, as you said, you could say very much a revolving door that we have to just flush money down, which I would argue is slightly different than you, but either way, I think we could both agree that that is not the optimal solution for the everyday American, just to continue to dump money. So I'm very hopeful in the area under this administration. I think that's probably, I don't want to say it's the only thing I support. It's it's not, I don't support everything, but I think that this is the only administration that's ever done a good job in trying to move that in the right direction. So again, I guess, sorry, just the last point is, the term Zionist is, I think, being conflated by a lot of people. I think that Israel has a right to exist and to defend itself. And I think that most people should agree at least that a democratic free nation in the Middle East like that is a good thing. Not necessarily talk about the money here, but it's a lot, very much in the righteous ways that can be a beacon of hope, I guess, if we can secure these peace deals.
Well, yeah. I mean, I hope you're right.
There's a lot of work to do.
Skeptical, to say the absolute least.
That's fine.
Just seems like the same playbook, similar playbook over and over again.
I don't think we've had somebody, this is why Hillary was a 97% chance of winning, right? Like, that wasn't the playbook for Donald Trump to win. Again, I don't want to condone his presidency or anything like that in one way or another. I think this is the first difference maker we've had in a very long time.
I think from a foreign affairs perspective, we'll see. I think, we could spend another 4 hours diving into each and every aspect of that entire conversation. And so we'll just have to do it again. But
before we log off here, just wanted to say three things. One, thank you for having me.
Of course.
This was fun.
It was fun.
I'm looking forward to having you back in Jiu-Jitsu. The second thing is, if you're interested in learning more about Thesis, you can find us at thesisml.com. Feel free to take a look. We have some models live. We'll have more upcoming. Feel free to reach out to me at ben@thesisfunds.com if you have any questions. And the last one, I got one more pull for you. Can you pull up Southside Boxing Club in Maui? Okay, so
no SSL, damn.
So we talked about doing, finding meaning in charity in a lot of ways, and like allocating resources to things that are important to us. When I was in Hawaii, and again, you have to keep in mind this was almost the end of the world in some regards. Nante here, the coach, not the one in the middle, the older guy right there. He let me come train with them, and it's a really beautiful mission. It's a nonprofit, and they bring kids off the street and they teach them boxing. And this small school in Maui has produced national champions, Golden Glove winners, really incredible job taking kids that have very little, especially after the wildfires that occurred in Maui a couple years ago, which, we could talk about, the money going elsewhere in terms of that. But the fact that has been swept under the rug in many ways. This is a really great and meaningful school that really helps out a lot of kids in need that are fellow Americans. And if you're in Maui, please hit them up. If you're interested in donating, please message me, or you can find their website, Southside Boxing Club Maui. Get in contact with them. This is the most meaningful way that I like to spend my time and money. So please check them out. And that's it. Thanks for having me on, Jordan.
Hell yeah. I love that. That's cool, man. That's a dope picture too.
Yeah, he's God, I don't want to age him up, but he's like 80 now, and he's still holding pads for me with like roundhouse kicks. I don't know how he does it.
That's crazy.
He's great.
That's fucking awesome. He looks great. Hell yeah, man. Yeah, dude. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for the chat.
It's fun.
I appreciate you.
No problem.
We'll do it again, dude.
Sounds good.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next time. Deuces.